And then I can apologize. Building was on fire.
Yeah.
And you can take over and
Hello and welcome to Powerful Devs Conference. This is a conference for code-first devs, like both of us, to unleash the power of the Power Platform. I am your host, Donna Sarkar, and this fine gent.
I'm Greg Hurlman. I'm your other host. Sorry for the delay in starting the stream today. The building literally caught fire for a second, but we're good now, and we're ready to roll.
We didn't do it. Contrary to popular belief, it was Greg and I's fault, but actually it was not. For once, it was not our fault. Okay, speaking of people who are on fire, we want to introduce you to the first set of keynotes. Today, who are we having? We're going to have Scott Gu and April having a interesting little fireside chat. And April's going to be asking Scott the hard questions about what is the Power Platform, why should code-first devs care, and 3, how can it help code-first devs elevate their careers? Are you excited about this?
I'm super excited.
I'm excited too. All right, April, take it away with Scott.
Thanks, Donna, and hi everyone. Welcome to the Powerful Devs Conference. This conference is all about showing code-first developers how they can embrace the Power Platform. My name is April Dunham, and I'm a Power Platform advocate here at Microsoft, and I'm so excited to be joined today by Scott Guthrie. He's going to be kicking things off here, and we're going to be doing a conversation around the state of the industry and how developers can embrace the Power Platform. Welcome, Scott. Thanks again for joining us for the second year here at the Powerful Devs Conference.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Well, I am really looking forward to this conversation and really diving into that and getting your thoughts and opinions on what the Power Platform has to offer for code-first devs. So you ready to get started?
Fire away.
Hey, so first question, kind of coming from me as myself, why I focus on the Power Platform here. I do come from a .NET development background. That's where I really started off. So probably everyone that's watching today that is a code-first developer is wondering, why are we talking about Power Platform and what's in it for the code-first developer?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of us, myself included, have come from, I'd say, a code-first background. And to your question of why should you care about the Power Platform if you write, object-oriented or procedural code? And I think the biggest reason I'd say is to have even more impact in terms of the applications you build, the solutions you build, and to the companies that you work for or deliver solutions to. And so, I kind of think of it in terms of impact and the ability to, leverage the ability of the Power Platform to quickly assemble solutions that can call out to APIs written in .NET or written in Java or any other code-first language, and effectively integrate them as part of a business process. And again, sometimes it's better to write a code API to implement functionality in a business process, but often in the final solution, you want to be able to assemble and connect that API inside a Teams environment or some type of online collaboration tool, with a CRM system or an SAP or a Dynamics ERP solution on the back end. And the beauty of the Power Platform is it makes it incredibly powerful to do that. And at the same time, still integrate and write the .NET and Java code that you know and love today, and integrate it all into one solution that makes, your customers happy.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great point. I mean, really, it's just another tool in your tool belt as a code-first developer that you can have, and really a productivity and time saver. I know that's how I got started with the Power Platform. Saw this thing called Power Automate, figured, hey, I can maybe automate some of my dev tasks in my simple day-to-day. And then I ventured into Power Apps and realized that this can save me a lot of time in front-end development too. So we can still use, the tools that we love and the back-end APIs, but we can just use it to kind of facilitate and make our life a little bit easier. So that kind of leads me, though, into the next question. So we kind of talked about a little bit of the benefits and why we should care as code-first developers about the Power Platform. But what would you say to those that still might be a little bit hesitant or reluctant to really adopt and use the Power Platform?
Well, I think one of the big things is recognizing it's not, do you build an application this way or that way? Meaning, do you use Power Platform or not? I mean, I think the real way I think about it is it's another tool in your tool chest, in the same way that another framework library is in your tool chest, or another DevOps tool might be in your tool chest, and it helps solve very specific problems. It's not, the be all end all that solves every problem in the world. No tool does that, but it can dramatically, I think, help increase the impact that you have. And so I think if you're hesitant, what I'd say is learn more. I think there's a lot there. And once you realize it's not all or nothing, and that you can use it to solve very specific needs that are sometimes painful with code to write, or certainly time consuming with code to write, I think you'll learn to appreciate it and be able to get even more done from it. And at the end of the day, I think as developers, all of us, want to measure our impact by, did we change the world? Did we change our company? Did we change end users' success from the applications that we build? And I think the Power Platform is a fantastic way to accelerate all those and really deliver that impact.
Yeah, definitely. Another excellent point there. It's not often an or, it's an and conversation. This is another thing that we can bring to just make our processes and the applications that we build even easier to build. So great point there. This kind of leads me into another topic that I did want to touch on, and that's the topic of the emergence of this concept of Fusion development teams. So this is kind of something that's not really new. Fusion development's been around a while, but with the emergence of low-code technology like the Power Platform, it's something that we're seeing really an increased adoption of. So these teams are, code-first developers and IT pros and business users and low-code developers working together to solve business problems. So my next question in that would be, how does the Power Platform, Azure, and Visual Studio family of tools really facilitate that cross-employee collaboration that we have in Fusion teams to solve business problems?
Yeah, and again, I think this is where it's very much an and, not an or. And so is it, do you use Visual Studio or Power Platform or Azure DevOps or GitHub? It's and, you use them all. And use which particular tool for a particular problem where that tool works best is kind of the real key. And part of what we try to do is integrate them all together. And so we've now made it so that you can go into Visual Studio, you can say file new project and create an API project using .NET Core, write a standard web API, run it locally, debug it, have a nice API calling experience. And then the beauty is you can now publish it into Azure, expose it with an API gateway. You can do metering, you can do authentication, you can do all the things that you want to do in terms of controlling access and monitoring access to that API inside your enterprise. And then you can go with the Power Platform, and with this, 2 clicks, you can browse all the APIs, subscribe to it, and now build, front-end experiences that are mobile apps or web apps that you can run standalone or say hosted inside Microsoft Teams. That again can run on your phone, they can run on your desktop. All with that integrated security and just all lighting up that functionality. And you could build a simple app in 10 or 15 minutes that does all that end to end. Or maybe instead of a UI app, you want to have automation. And so to your point of the workflow, if I want to build a Power Automate experience, I could say, every time an email arrives, call this API and then update my CRM system. Again, you can do all that in the Power Platform in minutes and take advantage of hundreds of built-in connectors that come out of the box that can integrate with Dynamics or Office or Teams or ServiceNow or SAP or Oracle or any other number of solutions out there. And that beauty of being able to take that kind of declarative, very fast Power Platform experience and at the same time still call your .NET APIs and be able to bridge into very procedural code. It's an and it's incredibly powerful when you put all that together.
Yeah, definitely. We've had, so many improvements and new things with the Titan integration with, Code First, ProDev tools, and the Power Platform. So I will say to everyone watching who maybe you've used the Power Platform and tried it out like 4 or 5 years ago, it's not the same set of tool set. We've added so much more functionality in there with the integration story from, the Power Platform CLI in the VS Code extension so that we can natively in the tools that we're already using as developers integrate and unpack our Canvas source code and deploy our assets and as solutions and all of that. So the integration has really come a long way and has really tightened and made it more seamless for developers to be able to take the tools they're already using and start plug and playing with the Power Platform to automate things. So definitely keep that in mind for all you watching. If you haven't looked at it lately, look at it again, because we have a lot of new great features that we've added from the code first developer side of things. So Scott, this has been great. I do have one more question for you. Speaking of these fusion teams and code first integration with the Power Platform, I know there's no shortage of amazing stories out there of this code first and Power Platform integration. But what is your favorite story? I'd be curious to hear that you've heard of this developer integration in the Power Platform.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple. I mean, I think what's great about I find for the Power Platform is like there's a new story every week that the team sends me that is often not just a great technology story, but it's a real like business impact story. And the last 18 months in particular during COVID, I think every organization has had to really adapt quickly and often change business processes, figure out how to work from home, create new security models, create new ways of doing business, all on the fly. And I like that so many of the stories I've heard, speak to the ability of developers in IT to not just get things done for their company, but really be essential to their company. And the companies in some cases wouldn't stay in business without them. And I think that ability to have impact at a deep business level, means that you as a developer are so much more valuable to the organization you work for. Yeah, a couple of just examples off the top of my head. Toyota Motor North America, is a giant organization, and delivers and manufactures vehicles and millions of vehicles across North America. And they have a whole wide variety of different solutions that they need. And it's again they need not just to build functionality, but they need really thorough governance processes. They will support tens of thousands of developers. And they built a center of excellence within the organization, and now built more than 400 different Power Apps. And these Power Apps are using not just Power Apps, but the Power Platform, but they're using our Azure AI services, both cognitive services, machine learning, computer vision, our Azure application platform and data platforms, and really stitching all these things together. And so if you're installing components and having to manage travel and safety because of COVID, they were able to create an app for that. If you're doing processes in support of employees that need help, healthcare and other things that are top of mind right now, they build apps for that. If they need to help manage supply chain crises, which everyone in manufacturing in the world today is having to struggle with, they build apps for that. And again, that ability to kind of pull all those things together and literally deliver hundreds of apps over the last year that touch every one of their employees' lives and really pull the full power of the Microsoft platform, I think again speaks to what's possible. And there's literally thousands of companies or tens of thousands of companies now that can tell that story. And I think, again, to everyone watching here, definitely encourage you to learn, because I think you could tell those same stories about your organization as you learn more about the Power Platform and you start playing around with it and learning what you can do with it, which has really changed the world. And so definitely wish you the best of luck with it.
Yeah, the Toyota story is really great. And I think it kind of shows we've actually got so many great stories coming out of the pandemic. We had to shift gears so fast to accommodate for the changing workforce there and working from home and everything that went along with it. So that really, in a way, gave the Power Platform an opportunity to shine, because customers, all these big customers like Toyota, were able to turn to that and be able to meet a need with something that traditional code alone might have taken quite a while to be able to adapt to get that. But with the Power Platform, they're saving so much time and being able to build solutions in days rather than weeks or months, and be able to meet the needs there from anything like, and we're seeing that again today with trying to get back to work and back in the office and return to work solutions. We have several templates and solutions that are kind of plug and play, ready to use for the Power Platform also to do things like reserving desk and desk reservations and reserving spots in the office to come back safely and all of that. So we've seen a lot of great stories evolve from that. And the Toyota case study as well. One of the things that really interested me was they started using Power Apps heavily for the application development side. And one of the things they were trying to do is surveying facilities. And they noticed that they're able to go from about a 5% of dealers surveying to 100% of dealers, which is a huge productivity gain there. So that was something that really stood out to me with Toyota story, just how quickly and how fast they were able to adapt and increase their productivity by embracing tools like Power Apps.
Definitely.
Yeah. And there's so many other great case studies as well that we have there. Coca-Cola bottling is another one that comes to mind. Again, using and integrating with all of the code first technologies that we're used to, like Azure Cognitive Services and AI and Visual Studio and .NET and APIs and custom connectors. Really, the possibilities are endless with what we can do. And you're going to see some of that today as the conference plays out here. We're going to see how we can integrate code in our custom connectors, which is a way that we can take our APIs and services and bring those into the Power Platform solutions that we're building. You'll see things like using space APIs and creating reusable components with Power Apps framework. So lots of different opportunities and things that we're going to see today for what we can do. This has been such a fun conversation, Scott. Last thing I wanted to ask here for everyone watching, do you have any call to actions for everyone here?
Yeah, well, I know, first of all, I hope you'll learn more from the conference. And then also, I know there's a lot of people watching that are on Fusion dev teams today and have experience using the Power Platform and doing Fusion development as a team and as a developer. And so it'd be great if you could send us some of your stories. I mean, it'd be great for us to both learn about them, draw and build the product better because of them, and then also share them at other future events and conferences. So definitely send us your stories, and we'd love to hear about them.
Yeah, definitely. And you can just drop those in the chat or even reach out to me on Twitter and let me know. We'd love to hear those stories. And also, if you're watching as well, I want to let you know that we do have a Power Platform developer plan that you can sign up for free to get started today, trying out some of the features of what the Power Platform has to offer. So you can go to aka.ms/Power Apps Dev Plan to get signed up for that free developer plan today and get started with that. Thank you so much for joining us, Scott. It's been a great conversation.
No, thanks so much for having me, and thank you everyone for watching, and really appreciate you being here.
Thanks. All right, back to you, Greg and Donna.
I love this conversation, Greg. This is such a good conversation.
It really was. It was fantastic, and honestly, all our devs everywhere should be tuning in because that was amazing.
That was amazing. And honestly, like Scott was saying, we've introduced all this new tooling into Visual Studio and all this stuff. You're going to hear a lot of them throughout the course of the day. And if you have questions, drop them in the chat. And that's why Greg and I are here. And he's been instrumental in creating like the learning path and the ebook and all of this other stuff. So drop them in the chat. Okay, so did you know that this is a carbon negative event?
I knew that, but it's because of our friends at Tradewater that are helping us make that happen. Let's hear from them to see how all that works.
So we will hear more about Tradewater later. Okay, Greg, so what are some of the sessions today that you're really excited about?
So I'm excited about the PCF session coming up just because that's been my thing for a good long time now. We're going to be talking about custom connectors. We're going to be talking about space today with those Azure Space APIs later on. That's going to be fantastic.
Azure Space. I love Azure Space. I know, that's so cool. Okay, Mariano's going to do an ALM demo. Do you know what ALM is? Application Lifecycle Management. So once you build an app, then what, right? I thought that his session's gonna be pretty cool. I haven't seen it. Have you?
Getting things out there so people can use it is super important. Talking about things that are out there, we're wrapping up with an IoT session, getting all that data, big data from out there, from all your stuff into your enterprise and your Power Apps.
I like that. And then Geetha's gonna be doing a session about custom connectors, like how you can DIY your own. I think that one's a very popular ask. Like everybody's always asking about custom connectors. So
Absolutely. Trying to get your APIs that you wrote used by somebody else. We've been talking about it there for years. This is your chance.
right, and definitely stick around for the lock note because April has a bunch of really hard questions. She's going to ask Charles Lamanna and Amanda Silver. So Charles Lamanna is the VP of the Power Platform. Amanda Silver is of Visual Studio.net, et cetera, all of our dev tools. And she's got them both corralled, and she's got a list of like real questions. Like, so why should devs use Power Platform? What are some of the key tools we've put in place to make it easy for Fusion teams? What are you two doing about it? So her list of questions is pretty legit. It's gonna be great.
Why should professional developers care about all this stuff? What do Fusion teams have for them? They get into that too. It's really something to see.
Yeah, I know. So I think that'll be really interesting. So one of the things that we have heard so much feedback from all of you is that it's kind of a pain in the neck to get started with Power Platform without like a work account, right? If you don't have permission from work to use, your @Microsoft email address or @whatever email address to start building for Power Platform, it's kind of a pain. So we've created a thing.
We have. There is the Power Apps Developer Plan. It's a free license for you to learn how to build Power Apps, how to develop these things, and we can get to that later and actually show you if we have time. But otherwise, go out to Power Apps Dev Plan, AKMS/Power Apps Dev Plan, and learn about that.
Okay, I think we have to stop talking because Diana is here, our first presenter of the day on Greg's favorite topic, PCF.
Absolutely. And the Power Apps Component Framework, it lets you create those custom controls, but now with our converged apps that we're building inside Power Apps, there's some extra power there. And Diana's going to tell us all about it.
Over to you, Diana.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Greg. So the PCF are my thing too. And let me show you what you can do with the PCFs when it meets the power of the custom pages. A few words about myself first. My name is Diana Birkelbach. I work for Orbis in Germany, and I'm principal developer on Dynamics 365 and Power Platform. You can reach me on Twitter or LinkedIn, but you can find me also in the Power Apps community forum when I answer a lot of questions about PCF. I have a blog where I blog a lot about PCFs, and in January I've become an MVP. So what about custom pages and PCF? Let me tell you a little about the Power Apps journey. What is a PCF? What is a custom page? But don't worry, I hope it won't be boring, because the most of the part will be a demo about a PCF who meets custom pages. So this one are the old slides from the Microsoft Business Applications Summit from 2019, where we get to know that the Power Apps is a journey. And we started with the Canvas apps, where we had to decide if we have which type of screen size we want to have. And we started with the model-driven apps on the other side. And we've got the Canvas component for the low-code possibility and the ProDev possibility that are the PCFs. And you can use both in the Canvas app and model-driven apps. Just in the model-driven apps, it was the embedded Canvas apps that you can use. And we was told there will become something like called Canvas page or custom pages, and that's where we are now. And there are a few steps to follow, but the target is having the converged app. So you don't have to decide in the beginning if you have a model-driven app or a Canvas app. You have one app and you can use the best of the both worlds, the Canvas apps and from the model-driven apps. So what is a PCF? So PCF is a framework for controls. It's a possibility for the pro developer to make code components. We have two types of components. We have the field components and the dataset one, and we can use them in all app types. We can use them in model-driven apps, where we can bind them to form, view, subgrid, or we can use them in Canvas apps, where we can use the power of PowerFX to combine the components. And in the Canvas apps, we can also use the power of connectors. And that way, we can use the PCFs that we designed also with the data sources that are outside the Dataverse. They are also for portals. They're in preview right now, but they're still to come. The PCF are generic and reusable. And what's the most important part, they are integrated in the platform. They are not like the HTML web resources where you just get an iframe. With a PCF, you get the possibility to work with a form. So to be controlled by the form, but to get the values. And when it's a data set, you get the data from the PCF framework. You can also interact with a ribbon, make exports, select elements, and navigate to the other elements. So for me, the PCF are the building blocks, the basic ones. For the custom pages are a new page type in model-driven apps. They are designed for the low-code experience. You can integrate them as a full page, as dialogue, or as a side pane. The custom pages has the Power Canvas apps because you can use the Power FX expression. You can use connectors. Remember, we are in model-driven apps and we can use datasets outside the Dataverse. You can use Canvas components, so you have the low-code power, and you can use the code components, usually similar to the ones from the Canvas apps, but you also have more possibilities like the one for the model-driven apps, because, for instance, you have features like a web API. They are integrated in the application, because you can navigate between custom pages and form and views back and forth. And they are different than embedded Canvas apps. So it's just a page inside an app, and the Canvas apps are just an app who can be shown inside a form. That's a big difference there. So for me, the custom pages are the glue. So let's have the use case, a delivery calendar. We have a customer who has to make deliveries. So we have the order table that has to be made to an account, and it's placed in another country. Each of these ones are on the Dataverse, some lookups. And we have the products that have to deliver it with this order. And when we have this order, you have the planned delivery, that's the expected delivery date, and you have the date where the delivery really took place, so the delivery date. And our customer wanted to have a calendar, to have all this information shown in the calendar. But how should we do that? So when there's a delivery made, we will gonna show this record for the delivery date. And if the delivery is not made, then we will take the expected delivery date. And let us show how this application is looking like. So first of all, we have made a PCF. So as soon as we had the PCF, we could integrate it in our application, and we designed it for the order. So you see here a PCF who is showing these orders, and you can switch between week or work week or month, and you see these orders, and with hover you can see information from the view we already show now. You can navigate to the order, or you can also place the same PCF on the account form, where we can show with the same PCF all the orders for this account with the same PCF. But the magic happens inside the Canvas page, so the custom page. So first of all, when you start the application, you are going to see if there are overdue deliveries. You can provide this information to the user, and because you know that there are overdue deliveries, you can show a button, and he can, when he clicks there, he can navigate to the view of orders, this time not with a PCF, because it wouldn't be that helpful, but with a list. You have the same functionality that you saw in the view and on the form, but you can also show the order details and the order items. So you can navigate between the months, and when you go back and you have a delivery that already should have taken place, but it was not there, you get a warning. You can also navigate to the order. So just in model-driven form, going back and forth. And you can also show some more information. So about account, about the country. You can show if it's a low-risk country or not, and some other information from that country. About the order items, you get to see the images from them. So you have a gallery there. You can see if they are out of stock. If that's the case, you get a small ring bell where you can click, and you have the chance that way to send a notification to the product owner. So you'll see here, I have not only the product owner shown here, but also the pictures. I could use that, a connector to show that. So you can change the text before you send a notification, and you notify. You get a notification that you've sent it. And let's suppose I'm the product owner now, and I'm starting the application. And I'm gonna get a notification. Here it is. So it's the ring bell there with a badge. You can see the text that I've sent, but you have also some buttons you can interact with. So you can open the product. And it's nice because you don't have to leave the work you were doing. You can open this page in a modal dialog. So you get to see what the product was about and what happened there. And you can also open the order. And the third button was about opening the whole custom page. It's also a dialog, so you don't lose context, but you see the same information the one saw who sent this notification. So I have everything there. Because we are working in model-driven apps, we have to think about this page being responsive, because that's the way the user is used to work. So you have to take care that the place and the page is showing the content in a responsive way. Let's see how we can customize that. So first of all, let's open the solution. But well, first of all, for showing the PCS for the views, we have to go back in the old customizing. So we go in the classic one and open the solution. And we open the entity, so the table order, and go to controls, and we can there customize the controls. So we open the add control, we choose the calendar from there. Don't forget to set it where it should be shown. And after that, we have to assign the 3 columns that I've designed for the PCF. So we have to know which is the title of the order. We have to set which is the delivery date and the expected delivery date. So we designed a PCF that will work with every entity, not only with orders, because the mapping will be made only in this moment. So after everything is set, all you have to do is save and publish. But you remember, when I've navigated to the overview view, I didn't have the calendar PCF. So for that, I will gonna choose another PCF. So I open the view for the overdue deliveries. I choose the custom control, and there I've chosen the Power Apps Grid, the preview. So each time this view will be shown, we will gonna see this PCF. Also, when we open the account form, we can customize there a subgrid and show there the orders. And of course, we can choose there with which control should be rendered. So we have the controls, and you see we have there the calendar having the same columns designed there. Okay, so all you have to do now is save and publish, and you have it now for the model-driven form and views. Let's see how we can do a custom page now. First of all, let's try to make an app, a model-driven app. We have to use the modern app designer. Let's call it somehow. And when the model-driven app is made, you have to add a page, and this time a custom. It's a preview. We create a new custom page. We have to add the data, so we have there the. After that, we have to add the PCF, so get more component, and we have to switch to the code tab. We choose there the PCF that's already loaded in my environment. And then I can drag the calendar on the canvas. Let's make it a little bigger. And now we can bind it to the data set. So we have the orders there, and you can choose a view or you can choose the fields. And then we have to define the property sets they are there. So we have to define the title. Sorry, that was the name. That's the one. The second one is the delivery date. And the third one is the expected delivery date. Okay, that's it. And you can see already, I can have some data shown in my PCF. Okay, let's speed it up a little. Here's the application already done. So you can see the areas here. We have some container. The first one is for the dialog, but we're gonna come back to that in a few seconds. We have the header, and we have a container for the body. On the left side, we have a container for the PCF. So delivery calendar is my PCF. And on the right side, let's zoom it a little, we have the container for the order details and the one for the products. And when we have a look to the gallery of the products, we can see how the PCF from the left side, it's linked to the products on the right side, because the items of the gallery are from delivery calendar one selected order products. And that way we can bind all the products for this order. And we have there a small ring bell. So when we click on that, we want to show the dialog. And actually what we do is set a notification, a variable, send notification to true, and that will be the trigger for the visible property of my first container to show this dialog. So if send notification is true, we're gonna show it. So just let me take it on true so you can see it. And I have the header, I have the product owner container. And as I said, the product owner, it's shown there, it's coming from the product, but the image, it's something that it's not in Dataverse. And for that, I've used the connector who is grabbing the image from the Office 365 users using the primary email of the product owner. For that, I had to add some data, and that's the connector to Office 365 users. The other parts are about showing this text where it's already filled in, and the part where it's become interesting is sending a notification. So on select of this button, we have the PowerFX expression that we're going to use. So you can see we start with some actions. So we have the view product, the view owner, and delivery calendar. And we grab them in a collection because we need an array. So we have these actions that we're going to pass as a data to the patch. So actually what we do here, we just create one record inside the notification. Notifications is a table inside the Dataverse. So we can set there some information like the title, the body, and the owner. And it's pretty interesting because if you don't set the owner, you will gonna send a notification to yourself. So if you set this owner, they will tell this notification for which user should this notification be shown. You have also some more information about the icon type and the array with the actions. And you can see that the first two buttons are page type entity records. So I'm going to show these entities. And the third one, it's a custom one. And I have the name of the custom page there. Also, the navigation target is for all three of them set to dialog. So I can show it as a dialog. After that, I can notify the user that this notification was sent, and I can show this dialog. So when this one is done, actually all we have to do is to publish this app. So we go to the app and publish. And when that's done, we are ready to play it. And the custom page is ready to be shown. Okay, just a few words about how I've made this PCF. Really, really short. So about the manifest, that's the first point to have a look when you look to a PCF. We have a data set, and I've set free some display command bar and some other properties. I have the 3 property sets that I've defined for my PCF. In the index, you won't see much because it's pretty clean. You have the init and update view, and all you have to do there, it's called the render for the application. The interesting part is about the package.js, and what I've used there is React Big Calendar. I've used React for taking care about date and type manipulation. I've used Moment.js. That's something that React Big Calendar was needing. And I've also used LCID. That's the library who will allow me to convert the user settings, time zone, to something that Moment can understand. But last but not least, I've used the Fluent UI because I have this hover card showing on the calendar, and that's the one I've took from the Fluent UI React. So just a few words more. We have the calendar here in my React component, and all I had to do there, it's just map to the properties. I've passed the data, and for the data, I have to define the filtering. So I'm able to add more filtering to my data set because I wanted for each month to have only the data from this month. So for that, I use the operation on or after, on or before. And back to my React component, I have the possibility to set my selected record ID. That way I can interact with the ribbon, or I can call the open dataset item that will navigate to the form. And about showing the hover card, I have here a component, and I have some properties that I can pass to this hover card, and that's the way it is designed and for a card. So that's pretty much what I wanted to show you. So let me go to my last slide. So please stay connected and keep learning. Participate to the Fusion development in the Cloud Skills Challenge. check out the Fusion Dev ebook, and you can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, and as I said, in Power Apps community forum. Thank you.
That was awesome. I loved it.
It was amazing.
Yeah, I loved it. By the way, those controls she's making, go TypeScript. I can't make that TypeScript like even a little bit, not even a little bit. That calendar, I really like that calendar. I'm like, Greg, show me how to make the calendar thing.
We've all wanted a good calendar inside Power Apps, and there we are.
Exactly. Okay, so do you want to tell everybody about how, I see all your comments in the chat, so thank you for chiming in with all of this like awesome questions. And can we give a shout out to the moderators? They're like on it. I'm about to answer something and Scott Duro's like, I got it. April's like, got it. One thing Diana pointed out in her last call to action slide, I don't know if you saw it, was the Fusion Devs ebook, which, do you want to tell everybody about how that came to be?
Yeah, we needed to create something that would let people really just dive right into what being a Fusion Dev is. Teach the code first developers how to be an app maker, and let those app makers know what the developers could do if given the opportunity. And that's what the ebook is all about. It's a good place to get started if you're just diving into some of the codey bits of Power Apps.
Yeah, it's kind of like the why, it feels like, of why Fusion teams are a thing, why we're investing in it so heavily, why we have all this tooling around it, and why we're having conferences like this to go talk to audiences like all of you. It's really, really fascinating to me how dev teams are just like super different now than they used to be. Back in our day, dev teams were like Dev 1, Dev 2, Dev 3, Dev 4, Dev 5. And Fusion teams are like Dev 1, low-code Dev 1, IT pro, maybe like a admin governance type expert. And together they come together to solve a business problem. And I think that's fascinating.
It is. It's great to see where you have the business, developers, those power users that maybe would have done everything in Excel before have something where everybody can see it together, and have central IT also be able to see it as well, so they don't have to worry about what's going on out there that they don't know.
Exactly. So right now I am on a Fusion team myself. I don't even think I even told Greg yet, but so I now lead accessibility tech for Microsoft. So I moved over from doing Power Platform advocacy, and my team is a Fusion team. I am a Code First Dev. My colleague Dan is also Code First Dev. And many people on our team are more business users. So they're ones who are like masters of Excel, which I'm not a master of even a little bit. Some are masters of, just from other industries. Some people used to work for nonprofits. Some used to work for like outdoors companies and that kind of thing. So when we get together, we form a Fusion team to solve business problems. So I'm like, okay, let's crack open Visual Studio and do something. And they're like, so another is like, let's crack open Power BI. And I'm like, how do you do? So it's very, very interesting to work with.
It can be, for
Totally
sure.
different.
And I'm a developer on Power Apps. We use Power Apps to run Power Apps, surprise. So it's kind of cheating, right? But we see it there too. Now I believe we were going to try to see if we can hear from our friends at Tradewater again.
Yes.
Fingers crossed. Let's see if that we can
see if
roll
it
that
works.
beautiful tape.
For that wonderful introduction, Brian. You're doing a fantastic job. Keep it up. Now, while I'm here, let's welcome in Kevin Schwarzenberg from Tradewater. Now, one of the first questions that come to mind here is, what is Tradewater, and what is the challenge you all are trying to address?
Sure. So Tradewater is an environmental project development company, and we're focused on improving the environment and creating economic opportunity through the collection, control, and destruction of potent, high-impact greenhouse gases.
Wow, that is quite the challenge, and what an initiative you all are being a part of. One thing I have in mind here that I'm wondering, as I was checking out some of the technology you all have developed and are using to help reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. Can you tell me, as you were developing all that, what is some cool technology or innovative project you came across that surprised you?
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things we've been working on lately is the ability to fractionalize offset credits. So the credits that we generate come in quantities that are equivalent of 1 metric ton of CO2, which is fine if you're offsetting a lot of emissions, like from a business or from a household for an entire year.
Right.
But what we've done is developed a tool and a technology to track fractional offsets down to the gram of CO2 equivalent, which allows us to sell offsets for things as big as the footprint of a business for a year, or as small as a cup of coffee, and pretty much anything in between.
Wow, this is all really amazing. And I'm really proud to say that as part of VS Code Day, we've committed to being climate positive by partnering with you all. And in addition to this, I'm wondering, and I imagine folks at home are wondering as well, how can they take part in helping in this effort?
Yeah, the best place to go to learn more is to our website, which is tradewater.us. We have more information there about our work, the type of projects we develop. We even have a little FAQ section about how carbon offsetting works.
Well, thank you again, Kevin, and I wish you the best of luck on your mission to just collect and destroy all of that gas.
Thanks, Brian.
See? Carbon negative. So cool, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Very cool. All right. Speaking of super cool, next up is our friend out of Georgia, Mariano Gomez, who's going to be doing a super, super interesting demo around application lifecycle management. That is, once you build the application, like Diana just showed you how to do, how do you maintain it? How do you keep it up to date? And how do you deploy it to other places? Hey, Mariano. Thanks for joining
Donna,
us.
how are you doing this morning?
We're doing great. Thank you.
So, are we ready to go? Okay, folks, good morning. My name is Mariano Gomez. I'm a Microsoft MVP and CTO at McCormick Incorporated. We are an ISV in the Microsoft Dynamics community. The topic for today is Power Platform ALM for Dummies. And by no means anybody here is a dummy. It's just one of the topics that we're going to cover and make this simple for you to understand. So the next, in my next slide here, here's my brief introduction. As I said, a Microsoft MVP running now since 2008. I've been through many, I would say, continents and countries speaking about the beauty and the benefits of the Power Platform and the Dynamics platform in general. This session is geared towards providing you basically with direction and on the concepts that drive the ALM experience with Power Platform and how to implement a successful ALM strategy. I'll also be talking about some tools and considerations so we can take that into account. So what I want to actually start with is a general understanding of where these things fit within the universe of Azure and Azure services. So as you probably know, Power Platform is actually a set of Azure services. And those Azure services or those services run inside your tenant. And if you keep in mind what that relates to, it's pretty much your entity, your virtual corporation on the Azure platform. Inside those Power Platform services, you define environments. And those environments basically run on your CDS, or includes your CDS components. I would say Dataverse. I know we don't refer to them as CDS anymore, so that's a slip of the tongue if you wanna call it somehow. So your Dataverse databases reside inside of your environments. In addition to that, the premise of the ALM experience is based on solutions. So as a citizen developer, as a pro developer, you must get used to the concept of solutions within those environments. And in order to deploy a solution, you must have in mind that you will need a CDS database or a database by default. So those solutions can host things like your Power Apps applications, certainly your Power Virtual Agents chatbot experiences, your Power Automate experiences, and certainly Power BI experiences, among all a host of other elements that you can store and host inside a solution. And we'll get to that in a second. Well, I'm not one that is known for driving slides, so let's get to the meat and potatoes of what we're trying to accomplish today. And I'm going to stop the slideshow here. So the first thing I want to call your attention to is definitely your environments. So in traditional Power Apps development or in traditional Power Automate development, we used to actually working within one environment. That concept actually changes slightly when it comes to ALM. And what you want to have is a set of environments rather that allow you to do development, exercise QA, and certainly release to production in a way of being able to separate the activity. So if you look at traditional Power Apps development, for example, typically those are done inside of one environment with the app being controlled and the version being controlled within that same environment. In ALM and for the ProDev experience, that's not quite best practice. So you want to have different environments that that host those application components, so those workflows that you develop, or even the chatbots that you create. Okay, so if I look at this particular environment, there's another concept that I want to bring to mind here quickly, and is the aspect of security. So in ALM, we got to be able to connect our DevOps experience with our Power Platform, and that is done in one of two ways. You can do it through an application user. If you go under settings here and you select users and permissions, and you choose application users, this is where you would, in essence, add an application user that is registered under your Azure application registrations. So basically, that application registration is what bridges your Power or your environment, your Power Platform environment, with your DevOps tool, whether that's GitHub or whether that's Azure DevOps itself. And today I'm going to be doing some demos on Azure DevOps, but the idea applies very similarly to your GitHub experience. Okay, so once I've actually created my application registration, and you can do it pretty simply here by adding a new app user, you can actually click on Add App. And that basically allows me to select among any of the app registrations that I have available, which one I would like to assign to my environment itself. Now, this actually has changed from previous experiences, because before you had to do this in kind of like a Dynamics 365 security environment. And it was kind of a little bit disjoint from this very slick experience that is being provided as of late. Okay, within your environment, remember that I said you manage solutions. So if you basically go over here to this particular environment, I actually have my dev environment here, but if I scroll down, you also see my production and my QA environments, which I've created prior to this session. Now, solutions are exactly where you're going to host most of your I would say most of your Power Platform objects. So if I click here on New Solution, the first thing you must do is actually set up a display name. But more importantly, you want to define a publisher. For those of you who are actually ISVs or professional developers, this becomes very important, because as a publisher defines all the topographic information that is necessary to populate and get your solution known, especially and more so if you're going to actually publish this on AppSource. So yes, for those of you who are ISVs, inclusively, as I mentioned before, my company is an ISV. When we define our solutions, we make sure we define our own publisher. And by default, you have some existing publishers, but I have actually created for this particular demonstration, this company XYZ publisher. Okay. Very important to understand, a solution cannot be actually created and hosted without a Dataverse database. So that's very key to keep in mind. So I have actually defined this expense solution here. And part of what I did in this expense solution, and this, by the way, is for an expense management application that I've created, is currently I host this expense application within this solution. But if I go to add existing, you can see now that you can add dashboards, dialogues, tables, environment variables, cloud flows, desktop flows, and all sort of other type of objects, including AI models that are going to make up your solution. And this is why this model of solution is very important to your experience, because this is the basis, is the foundation of your DevOps process. So how does this reflect, and how do these things really interact with your ALM environment? So let's go over here to my Azure DevOps environment, where I already have a project called Powerful Dev Conf 21 already created. But if you're already familiar with this, you can always define a project from your project desktop. All you have to do is create a new project and make sure that that project is guaranteed contribution rights from all your developers and all the developers in the environment. So key here is once you're in the DevOps space, you will want to look at the marketplace. Because in the marketplace, what you will want to do is you will want to install the Power Platform toolbox. Okay, so the Power Platform build tools are actually installed, or you can actually get it for free from the marketplace to install in your environment. Well, this is important because the Power Platform build tools actually contain all the different deployment tasks, build and deployment tasks that you're going to need to maintain proper ALM. Okay, so that's something that you want to keep in mind. You want to make sure that you install the Power Platform build tools, and in those build tools, particularly, you're going to have once you create your project. Let me go back to my Visual Studio environment, DevOps environment. You're going to have these different components now being hosted inside of your Azure DevOps environment. So that's important. For those of you who are professional developers, you know that code cannot be hosted without a repository. So you will want to add a repository to your project that's going to basically host all your DevOps components, or your project components. Now, that project, remember, part of it comes from, or a lot of it comes from your solution within the Azure, or within the Power Platform environment itself. Now, the first thing is that you need to ask yourself then is, how do I actually get my source code, my Power Apps, or my Power Automate source code into my Azure repository? And that is done through pipelines. Okay, so the first pipeline that I have here is the pipeline that actually allows me to pull data from my repository. So if you go here and click on edit, this will actually bring up the pipeline that I already built. It's a YAML pipeline. But for those of you who are not necessarily familiar with YAML and you actually like the traditional way, you can still build a pipeline using the classic editor. So keep in mind that that's still available to you. But if you want to actually use the modern experience within the DevOps pipeline, you can actually then use a combination of YAML, or if you're not familiar necessarily with YAML development, you will then use and resort to the Power Platform different tasks, the Power Platform build tools tasks that we previously installed. So whether you write YAML or whether you're comfortable with YAML or not, you must have the build tools installed. So as you can see here, there's different tasks that allow you to check your solution, for example, analyze it for defects. You can actually create an environment if you need to. So I didn't have to necessarily define those environments to begin with. I could have actually created them if I wanted to with a specific build tool or build tool task from my Azure DevOps environment. Now, inside, as you can see, this particular repository task or pipeline does a few things for me. It does allow me to, first and foremost, deploy my Power Platform tool installer, which is nothing more than a collection of PowerShell scripts that allow me to interact from my agent with my Azure, with my Power Platform environment. Okay. The next thing that I can do here then is export that solution. So once I've actually installed the tools, I want to export the solution from my Power Platform environment down into my DevOps environment or into that agent that is running. Subsequently, what you want to do then is, because that is delivered in the form of a zip file, you will then want to unpack that solution. And unpacking that solution then takes that zip file and then explodes it into the different individual files that that are part of your overall solution. And subsequently, what I do then is I apply a task, a command line task that then moves that solution or those files into my repository. And I can make all these scripts available to you. Typically, you can find them on my YouTube channel, and we'll get to that at the end of this session. But this is actually available for you, or from the GitHub repository, the Power Platform GitHub repository, for you to actually use and consume within your pipeline experience. All right. So this basically takes care of the repo. So if I actually run this pipeline, I can then execute the tasks within that pipeline. And that's going to allow me to then queue up my job. And if you look at this, it will then execute the different tasks that will allow me to get the solution components from the Power Platform environment and move them into my repository. So that's the first thing that you must do. You must establish a relationship between your environment and your Power Platform environment, and being able to retrieve those solution files into your Azure DevOps repository. Okay, so right now the tools are being installed, and once that is completed, which is fairly quick here, it should be a matter of less than a minute perhaps to get all this installed, then you will be able to see the next step within the repository once you have your repository established. So I'll let this run for a second. I want to actually go back and refer to Power Platform or Power Apps and Power Apps applications for 1 second. And one thing here is, with Power Apps applications, remember that you had a rudimentary version control system where you would have to promote one version if you wanted to or an older version if you wanted to go back to a previous version of your app. That was just introduced recently with the workflows with Microsoft Power Automate workflows. So you kind of have those capabilities too. But nonetheless, if you are a professional developer, that experience wasn't necessarily adept to what you're used to. And this basically takes that guessing out of the game. Okay, so here we are with the modules being installed. That should take a couple more seconds, so we'll let that run for a bit. I guess today's the day all developers decided to do pull requests, so that's something we're gonna wait for here. One thing that I'm asked constantly about the build tools, they're actually available for free from Microsoft. So you don't need to pay or register or do anything to that effect. Just download them from the market and make sure they are part of your tool set within Azure DevOps. Couple other things what this executes is if you go under project settings, this is something that I'm also asked constantly, is in order to establish a connection to your DevOps environment, there's a couple of options. You can actually go through the service connections, and as you can see here, I have a service connection that is a Power Platform service connection to establish that connection to my environment. So let's take a look quickly here at service connections. There's two types of connections that you can work with. If you are actually running a non-MFA environment, you probably want to use a generic connection. And in that generic connection, you will then establish a URL, and that URL is basically the URL to your environment. Where do you get the URL for the environment? So if you go back to Power Platform Admin Center, and you then go to environments itself, okay? Once you get the list of environments presented to you, you will be able to select under the settings of that environment, let's take a look at here, at Power Platform DevConf. You'll basically able to copy this URL, and that's the URL that allows you to link under that service connection. Over here. Under that service connection, you paste that in plain text, and that's basically the environment URL. Now, this is for non-MFA. So here, obviously, you will be establishing a user ID and a password to authenticate. And then you fill out the service connection name and description. Now, that's for a generic service connection. If you are in an environment where you are running MFA, then particularly you want to use a Power Platform connection. So with this Power Platform connection, you have the same capabilities. So you have the server URL, the tenant ID. This will be your Azure tenant ID from your registration, okay? So for security reasons, I'm not going to display my tenant here, but under your Power Platform app registration, you will have access to your tenant ID. Now, going back to the settings themselves, you'll fill out that tenant ID. You will then enter the application ID and the client secrets. So it's important to define and capture those client secrets once you define them, because after that, you don't have access to it. You probably will have to end up creating a new one if you forget to copy what the application ID is. Same thing here, you would define a connection name, a description, and certainly grant permission to all pipelines to be able to execute under those protocols. Now let's go back to pipelines here quick, and let's see where we're at with our job. It seems to be running yet. That's unfortunate. So I expected this to be running fairly quick here. Okay, so I believe this pipeline just completed. So let's go on the repos here and then double check. So effectively, I have my repo now with the different application components that are part of this solution that I created. Okay, and as you see, there's an MS app here available to you. So part of the challenge with the ALM experience is that there are all these tools and you cannot sometimes make sense of them. So the best thing to do is once you have your application or your solution in your repo, you can clone this solution. And what I will do here is clone it using, clone it in VS Code. And once I do that, I can then basically determine what directory I'm going to send this to. So for all intents and purposes, I'm going to clone it under the presentation folder that I have here. under speaking engagements. And I'm going to actually locate the Powerful Devs conference folder. So that's where I'm going to clone it. And I'm going to select this as my repository location. And as you can see, this begins the cloning process. Now, once this is completed, I will show you a couple of things that are very interesting here. So we're going to add this or open it in a new window for all intents and purposes. And now I have my repository clone here, and I'm going to close this out. So a couple things to keep in mind here. You also have what is called the Power Platform command line interface or Power Platform CLI. That is actually downloadable as an extension. If you go to the list of extensions here, sorry, wrong button. So here in extensions, I have the tooling necessary to actually create my Power Platform or interact with the code that I actually just downloaded and cloned from my repository. Now, keep in mind that you cannot necessarily interact with just the MS app. There's actually no code in that MS app. So if I expand my solution here, I still have that MS app option that is present currently from the application that I just downloaded. So how do I get to the code? This is where the Power Platform command line interface options come into play. So I'm going to actually set up a new terminal here. And under that new terminal, what I'm going to do is I'm going to unpack my MS app application. So I'm just going to choose this option here, and I'm going to paste it in here. So give me 1 second here. Let me grab this from over here. And let's just paste it here. There we go. So if I actually use the pack command and this canvas option that was just added here recently, I can then unpack the expense application that I have as a part of my expense solution project and send it to its own folder. So let's do that. File, let's see. Okay. Wrong directory. Here. So here in expense solution, I have my Canvas directory. So my Canvas apps directory. So I'm going to just pass over to that one. Okay, there we go. And now I'm going to paste my my unpack command. So as you can see now, this is actually unpacking the application. And what I end up with is another folder called Expense Solution Source, which is where I decided to send it. And if you look under here now I have access to the actual YAML files that make up that source code. So if you look at, say, for example, the my expense YAML file, if I actually look at that over here, I can see now that all my code is embedded here. If I actually wanted to go ahead and add more code to this, I could do it directly from Visual Studio Code as opposed to doing it directly in the Power Apps Studio if I wanted to. Okay. Obviously, things like your workflows, your Power Automate workflows, you probably still need to do some of that modification in the Power Automate Studio. But as more and more these components are added to the Power Platform command line interface, you will be able to do more and more eventually with the studio itself. Now, I actually would like to see in the near future, obviously, color coding and these kind of things brought to the development of Visual Studio Code for Power Apps applications and even for workflows. I'm sure that's something that does not escape the mind of the dev team. But if I were to go ahead and modify any of these commands, then I can effectively go ahead and or change anything here for example, from approved to completed, right? Maybe I was asked to make a change to that text. I can do it comfortably and then save and repack my application. So let's see how you would do that. Effectively, I would just use the canvas pack command, and I would just do cd pack, and I would then make sure that I can repack that application. And you guys already know the process. You would then take this new MS app and check it back into your repository, where you can then go ahead and do things like doing a build pipeline to your QA environment. So that's what I'm going to actually talk about here now. So if you go back to pipelines, I have a pipeline in here that allows me to then run this particular set of options, and then we can see what tasks are a part of this. This task will then, again, install the Power Platform tools, which is, again, a set of PowerShell scripts that allow you to repack your solution, or import it back into that QA environment. And what we want to do is, with each import, we want to also export that solution back to the artifact directory, and then publish those artifacts once we know that they are in fact complete, tested, and making sure that everything is sound within our environment. Okay, so here we are. We're just gonna do a quick run here. And that will then go ahead and execute this job. And that will then move everything back to my QA environment over here. So if I go to Powerful DevConf and I select my QA environment over here, I will see that solution pretty soon added to all the list of solutions within this environment. Now, I think that once we have that in place, we can then run through the other pipeline, which is our release pipeline. And our release pipeline then defines the list of steps or actions that I'm going to take in order to basically deploy this into a production environment. So if you're familiar with release pipelines in Azure DevOps, they do allow you to set up tasks. And those tasks basically are tied to a set of artifacts which we produce in the prior build. And all this will do then is run the installer and import that solution into your production environment, and off you go. So in a nutshell, I've actually brought all three components, including the Power Platform build tools and the Power Platform command line interface in Visual Studio Code, to provide a single experience, a single professional developer experience that allows you to do team development if you want to with Power Platform. Finally, what I want to do is I want to call your attention to, for those of you who are GitHub fans, to the GitHub actions available with the Microsoft Power Platform. So you can also have that complete experience if you are a GitHub user as well. And here you have the different actions that are available with GitHub, and making sure that you can effectively manage through that experience equally. So again, stay connected, keep learning, participate in the Fusion Development and Cloud Skills Challenge. We really, really would like to see you there. Check out the Fusion Dev ebook. It's something that you want to have on the arsenal of tools. Follow me on Twitter, connect on LinkedIn, and definitely subscribe to my YouTube channel, where I have more and more information about the DevOps experience with Azure DevOps. So thank you very much, and I will see you soon.
All right. Even with Power Apps, you can rub a little DevOps on it with all those things that we just take a look at. But now it's time for custom connectors, a little bit of API management, and maybe in some teams with our friend Geetha. Thank you.
Hey, Geetha, you here? We're
Yes,
really excited.
I am.
Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, Donna and Greg. I am super excited to be sharing all things code and custom connector. A little bit about myself. I am an app dev architect with Artist Consulting based out of Dallas, Texas. And I'm also a power addict, passionate about all things Azure and Office 365, the business applications MVP, and also the co-founder of the Dallas Fort Worth Power Apps and Power Automate UG. So today, the next 30 minutes, we're going to be learning or getting a high-level overview of what it means to embed code in custom connectors, why, the benefits of enabling code, and then looking at a few example use cases, and then also some of the top frequently asked questions that I've had when this first got released, and also that I've seen being asked in the community. Now, before we start talking about embedding code in custom connectors, let's talk a little bit about what custom connectors really are. So custom connectors are more like a wrapper around a REST or a SOAP API that actually allows Power Automate or Logic apps or Power Apps to communicate with your backend services. They're useful, especially when you don't have a pre-built connector. If you don't have something that's already wrapped up and available for you, then you can create one that can talk to your backend service, be it a legacy system or an API layer, and then you make them available, and that can expose like triggers and actions that can be used or consumed by your users that are building solutions on the platform. Now, within custom connectors, there is this concept of policy templates. They allow you to add policies to modify the behavior of a custom connector at runtime. So you can use one of the out-of-the-box templates that can be used to perform data conversion or maybe route requests, or you can set parameter values and more. But what if those templates don't fit your needs and you need to be able to go above and beyond and transform those request and response payloads beyond the scope of the existing policy templates? So that's where code in custom connectors actually come into play. So when code is used, you have to remember that actually takes precedence over the codeless definition. So very recently, the C# code in custom connectors was made available in public preview. There are several things that you can do with it. You can have complex transformation of your payload or your incoming requests. You can manipulate data to make it easier for connectors to be consumed, especially in Fusion Dev scenarios. You can also add additional data to your response or parameters to incoming requests. And you're not limited to that. You can also send external requests to fetch additional data. Now, the good thing about this, especially in the case of Fusion Dev scenarios, is that you are masking all of that and abstracting that away from your business users. So it makes it really easy for you, being a code first dev, to wrap all of that into a custom connector and then make it easy on your business users to consume it. Now, the next big question is how? How do I get code embedded in custom connectors? Now, before you get started with writing code, I'd highly recommend you review what are the supported classes and namespaces. There's a blue link at the bottom of that screenshot that has a really good write-up of sample code, and then they also talk to you about what the limitations are and then what you need to know before you start writing. And it's really helpful when you start looking at that as a reference. Not all C# namespaces are supported at this time. But most of the common ones like collections or regex or JSON link, they're all supported. And so the couple of things that you want to keep in mind when you start building is that right now it's only C# code that's supported, and you can only have one code file per connector, and the maximum execution time of your connector has to be 5 seconds. And we have to remember this is in public preview, so things will get better in the future. I'm sure there'll be support for additional features. And then also the max size of your code file is 1 MB. So that little screenshot that you're looking at on the right, you'll notice that you can embed code there. Like you can literally like upload a file, or you can even embed C# code in there. You have to have a class name script that inherits from script base, and then you also have to have an execute async method. So these are things that you have to, and you can have within the async method, you can call other methods if you want, but that's at a minimum, these are the prerequisites to get started with it. So next up, we'll start looking at a few demos. We're going to be pretty light on presentation today because I know everybody loves demos. They want to see things working and makes it easier to look at stuff virtually working. So here is a sample public API that I have. And what this does is just spits out a list of user information like IDs, email, like this sort of dummy data that I'm using, that I'm going to be using in my custom connector. And what I've done for the purposes of our demo is that I've wrapped that behind an APIM, an API management layer, just so I can, make calls and walk you through it. Now you'll notice that this call over here has a lot of chatter. Now let's assume you are the CodeFist dev in a Fusion team and your business users across the organization are wanting to use this custom, this API layer that talks to legacy systems, and you don't have a predefined connector out there, so you build a custom connector for them. Now a bunch of the teams and your business users don't really need all of this chatter around. All they need is just this array of user information and wrapped in an object that's more user-friendly for them. So that's what we're going to see. We're going to see how you can embed code in a custom connector and transform this, pretty much extract this data and wrap it into a custom object and expose that for your business users. So we'll take a look at how we can do that. Now here in my custom connector UI, and you'll notice that this is how I have it set up. This is my endpoint. I have my base URL. It's using an API key. And then we have our definitions. I have my actions, which is going to be getting my API users. Nothing too complex here. I'm just going to go on to the code preview section. So when you are custom connector UI, you will notice that there's a fourth segment called code, and it will have preview in the text. Now you can upload a file. So remember, it has to be about 1 MB in size. That's the max that it can support. Or you can copy paste code too. Now, when you start working with C# code in here, be sure that you test it locally, because right now you don't have a way to debug within the web interface. But that's something that will be supported, and it's coming in the future. But you'll notice that you have a drop down here that actually lists all my actions. So it's pretty smart in a way that you can pick which operation do you want your custom code to override. So when you have custom code embedded and pointed or associated to an operation, it means these are the lines of code that are going to take precedence over your code list definitions. Now, if you don't have anything selected, then the default behavior is it's going to apply these lines of code or this transformation to all of your operations. That's something you want to keep in mind. So let's take a look at what we're doing here. So we have our script class here, and then it's inheriting from script base. And when you first start from scratch, you will see a blurb of a few lines of code with just a hello world example that already does all of this outer class and the async method out for you. And then, you can comment out the hello world example and start plugging in your piece of code. And that's what I've done too. So I'm basically initiating a response, and I'm going to make a response to the backend, because I'm going to tell my custom connector, hey, I do want to make a response. Let's go bring back my payload. And then if it's a success, then I want to parse my JSON. And you'll notice that by default, this supports Newtonsoft, so which is exciting, because a lot of our responses are in formats that you want to transform and manipulate. So it's good news that it already supports Newtonsoft. So I'm parsing that out. And then what I'm doing is I am capturing that data object. So if you remember, we looked at our response, and this is what I want. I want to clear out all the other clutter in this. And so that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm saying, just get me that data object, but then I'm going to create my own object and make it much more user-friendly for my business users to look at. So I'm plugging that in and then returning that as a response. So every time a business user uses this custom connector and make a call to this specific operation, they are going to see this transformed response. They won't see any of the other properties in the JSON object, but just that data object. Now, you do have a way to test it out, but what I'm going to do is just show you a quick test in Flow so we can look at the raw output. So it's just a simple flow. I'm just going to be triggering it manually. I have my action here, and I have pagination enabled. So I'm just going to say, just get me the first page of users. So let's go ahead and get that kicked off here. It should be pretty snappy because the payload is really small. Let's give it a minute. things happen when you're live. It ran really quick a couple of minutes back, and then now it's taking a while. All right, why don't I do this? Let's go back to a prior run, and let's take a look at that. That way I can show you what that payload is going to look like. All right, so here's our successful run that I ran just a couple of minutes back. And so you'll notice we've made the call. And then if you look at our raw output, now we have a much more cleaner transformed JSON object that our body of parameters that our business users can use. So it really does help change the way Fusion teams work because now you make it really easy for business users to consume data. They don't have to work through, dropping in a bunch of select or for loops to try and get it out of in a format that they wanted to, and then plug it into a new custom object that they want to create. So you have all of that done, and then now I have a really clean list of user information, and that's pointed to my custom object. So that was a simple example just to show you like how you can extract what payload, the response payload that's coming in, extract the data, and then plug it in to an object. Now, we're going to go ahead and take a look at a slightly more complex scenario. Let's say we want to do a regex validation. Let's say you have API endpoints. I'm going to go get a specific user information, but I want to make sure that the email information in the system is actually valid. So we're going to try and use a regular expression to make sure that the email validation is runs correctly. So what I'm going to do is let's go look at our next API here. So I'm using the same public API. You'll notice that this is the data that it sends back. Now, when I am returning the response through the custom connector to the user back, I don't want to be giving them any of these. All I want to do is just extract the email and then run the regular expression. Excuse me, sorry, I'm going to sorry about that. So I'm going to extract the email information, run the regular expression, and check if it's valid. And then I'm going to strip out all of this. I'm going to form my own custom object and return back to the user saying, hey, here's the user's email, and it matched my validation. So let's take a look at how we've built that out. So I have another custom connector pointing to my APIM that's backed by this public API. Nothing too complex. Now we have a few additional operations here. Then I'm going to go to our code preview. So here you'll notice things are a little different. The class and the method are the same, just the content within it is a little different. We're doing the same thing like we did the last time where we are parsing the JSON out. But this time I am navigating to 2 levels to capture what the user email is for that user. And then I'm actually passing in what my regular expression needs to be. So by default, it does support. So, before you, that's why, we mentioned at the very beginning, when you start building out, go check out the supported namespaces, because that would make it really easy for you to plan out how you want your code to be embedded. So I have a regular expression to validate that it's an email. Then finally, I'm transforming it. So I'm creating my own custom object that's going to strip out everything else that the payload response had. Just plug in the email and then just tell you if it's a valid email or not. And it's going to match the expression and tell me if it's valid or not. So what we're going to do is run a quick test here. Something's happening. Let me go ahead and refresh this. Well, wasn't expecting this to be failing. Well, I don't think the demagogues are happy with me today. Let's see. It says maybe something happened with my API layer. So let me see if I can pull an existing run. Sorry about that. Let's see if I can pull one. Have a bunch of flows, me out playing around with it. Let me see if I can pull one of the existing ones. And my portal is really slow. Bear with me for a minute. Now, while we wait on that to load up, there's something that I wanted to also point out. A couple of things to note, like when you make a change to the code embedded in custom things that I've learned while playing around with this, you have to remember it's in public preview, so things are, there's going to be updates and it's going to evolve at time. So I've noticed that sometimes that when you make an update, it may not reflect right away. So what I normally do is I'll add a okay, there it is. Let me see if I can pull that up to show you what that response needs to look like while that's coming. Yeah, back to what I was going to say. Yeah, so what I normally do is I'll just add another response to just spit out like a dummy text saying hello world, and then I'll let the test it out, and then I'll know that it picked it up, that the new changes have been updated. Then I'll go back and revert my change. So it's intermittent, but it's just something that I wanted to share that I've seen that works well for me. Let's see if wow, it's taking a while. Let's give it one more minute. I seem to have really good network connection here, but my load doesn't want to show up. Well, while we wait for that, maybe I'll move on and talk about the most common frequently asked questions, and then we'll get back to this and hopefully it comes up by then. So these are some questions that I had when we first started, and then also I've seen these questions come up in the community as well. One of them is, this is a premium service. So yes, it is, because it's, you're pretty much using custom connectors. It's an extension, so it is a premium service. How to test code. So today there's not a way that you can test code within the interface, but you want to make sure that you test it locally before you upload or use it within the custom connector. If there are errors, it does a good job of indicating that something went wrong, but not exactly what. It wouldn't really compile, and it will throw an error saying something encountered, but that's an indication that something is wrong. So you might want to test locally before you bring it into your custom connector. And then how about logging and debugging, right? Being code first devs, you want to be able to log and trace and be able to debug as you test. Not supported at this time, but it's on the future roadmap, so it's going to be coming. So, and remember, it's in public review, so hopefully before it becomes GA, we'll have all of these features. And then can you access values from the codeless operators in the custom connector? How we talked about when you enable custom code, the code is what takes priority over codeless operations in the definition. So if you have an operation tied or associated to the custom code, and when that runs, you cannot access operations for that specific endpoint that this code is applied to. But you should be able to do it for others. But once you have code in place, it overrides it, so you can access them. And then any limits. So this is just a quick review of what we've talked about. Your max execution time should be 5 seconds. It has to be 1 MB of code file size. It has to be 1 code file per connector, and you can only use the supported namespaces. So those were the frequently asked questions that I wanted to share. I'm going to go ahead and see if, oh, okay. All right, let's see. All right, that's what I wanted to show. So ideally, it would be raw text that I would get back. But let's go back to just to remind you all like what we were actually doing. So we're transforming it. We were applying a regular expression, and then we wanted to format our own response, so the users don't have to work with this whole JSON output that got spit out of this connector. So we're just passing the user email, and we're able to perform a regex expression, and we have a formatted and very clean looking response. So this tells me that this is the user's email ID, and the regular expression matched, and it's a valid email ID. So it's as simple as that. This was just a very high level overview of how you can embed code in custom connectors. I mean, I'm pretty excited about it, and I'm looking forward to trying several other namespaces as well. But I do see this being a huge improvement in the Fusion Dev scenarios, especially. I wanted a quick call out. So you want to learn more about Fusion Devs and how to get involved. Make sure that you check out the Cloud Skills Challenge, and then take a look at the Fusion Dev ebook. And for those of you who have joined me today and who will watch on demand, thanks for taking the time. And you can follow me and you can connect me with these links here. And I am looking forward to hearing how the community uses this feature to solve a variety of problems.
Okay.
All right.
First of all, I am so envious about that giant code preview box.
It is amazing.
In Power Automate. So I'm just like, when did this happen? Greg's like, it says preview, Donna. That means it's new. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. That's pretty cool, right? You got Visual Studio inside Power Automate.
Yeah.
What?
Blink and you miss it. There's always new stuff going on, and this is one of the nicest things. Some C# in my custom connector. Get out of town. It's great.
I know, exactly. Like C#, a language that many of us grew up with, right? It's like first language. People are like, what's your first language? C#. Well, it's C++ really. But
C++, basic.
something, yeah, C#. Yeah, I love that. I thought that was super cool. And Geeta is one of our Power Addicts. How many of you are Power Addicts? Drop a yay in the chat if you're a Power Addict. What is a Power Addict? Power Addict is a person who loves the Power Platform space so much that they not only live the life, but they also go and teach others about it all over the world.
Absolutely. One of the best parts of the Power Platform is our community, and that starts with those Power Addicts.
I think they've made a little video. Can we cue to that?
I'm a Power Addict.
I'm a Power Addict.
I'm a Power Addict.
The whole mission and goal is to just provide a platform so all the rising Power Addicts around the world can showcase all the amazing things they're building.
It's not about the success of people now, it's about the success of people coming up.
You work with Power Apps, you have infinite options in your future, and then you have infinite access to all the friends around you.
#Power Addicts on Twitter, where you can always reach out, tweet if you have a problem, if you want to share something.
I guarantee you someone will see it and ask, do you want to jump on a Teams call and let's figure out how to help you remove your roadblock.
The whole reason Power Addicts is existing is the people.
To join Power Addicts, basically you need love for the community, and the thing that you get out of it is love from the community.
Every time you get helped, you're motivated to help someone else. And it kind of goes through that full cycle. And that's how, all of the Power Addicts work.
Love those Power Addicts. They really are the backbone of that community.
They really are. So it's one of the reasons we have one of the best communities for Power Platform in the world. I actually think it's the best community. Am I biased?
It really is. It really is. And it's because they are super welcoming. If you're new, if you've been doing this forever, they want to hear from you, they want to answer your questions, and hopefully you can join in and help the new folks behind you.
And honestly, the best way to be a Power Addict is get on Twitter, put #Power Addicts after your name, and they will find you.
They will absolutely find you.
That's
in
how
a good way.
I found them and they found me. It happened in a day. It was very, very cool. Okay, so we're midway, almost, actually we're past midway through the show. We just have an hour and a bit left. What are you looking forward to?
I am looking forward to really our next session. We're going to take some of this custom connector stuff, where we're going to reach out to outer space. We're going to get some of the APIs for some of that space information, I think from SpaceX, and get that into our Power Apps, into our Power Automates, into whatever else we want to connect it to. And Linda Nichols is going to show us the way.
Thanks. So I'm going to talk a little bit about using space APIs to create out of this world apps. So first, let me introduce myself. I'm Linda Nichols. I'm on the Global Black Belt team at Microsoft, which is the coolest name of a team ever in the universe, but especially at Microsoft. And we focus on app modernization, app innovation, and we love Power Apps and Fusion development. I included this photo of myself here because I am presenting live in person, which hasn't happened in a while, to some Girl Scouts. And right here, we're actually doing some low code development to move robots, specifically drones. And so I love low code, I love robots, but even more than robots, I love space. So here's my scenario here for space apps. So I want to make lots of cool space apps. There's a ton of data out there. There are NASA APIs. There are APIs about, near Earth objects and meteors and weather on Mars and the photo of the day and who's in space and where is the space shuttle. There's so much data out there that you can hit an API and get back all of this data in JSON format. And so I want to make all of these into apps. And so I really needed a really fast way to create lots of really nice looking applications. As I say here, I am not a UI developer. I can create the code to make front ends, but they do not look good because that is just not what I'm good at. So that's what's the great thing about Power Apps, is that you can create nice UIs. And also, I am a professional developer, but I do love low code development. So I was really excited to then use Power Apps to create my space apps. So I want to talk a little bit about what modern low code development looks like. So on the left here, we've got Visual Studio. That could be Visual Studio Code. That really could be your IDE of choice. GitHub, your revision control. And these are my professional developer tool set right here on the left. These are the things I'm comfortable with as a professional developer. On the right, I'm sort of starting from the bottom with Azure App Services. So really here, I really love serverless development. So for me, this is going to be Logic Apps. It's going to be Azure Functions. It's going to be this sort of low infrastructure, low overhead types of app services. And then those are then kind of fronted by API management. Now, API management here gives me a ton of features for my application. So I can aggregate lots of APIs together. Perhaps from app services, I even have microservices. And it also provides an extra layer of security if I need that. And right here, especially in the frame of talking about Power Apps, it creates a level of abstraction. So really, if I'm creating these custom connectors for my Power Apps, then they can use the URL for my API management APIs. And then whatever changes on the app side, maybe I change the backing services, or even I hit an external API, that URL stays the same and the custom connector stays largely the same. On the top here, I have Teams, because Teams is where I live. This is where my team lives. And so this is our main productivity tool. So if I'm talking about space apps, I want to share the space apps with my team. Well, the easiest way to do that is to create Power Apps for Teams so that when we are in our Teams channel, we can just see our cool space data. So now we're going to talk about Fusion development, which we've heard a few times here, even since the keynote with April and Scott. But I just want to kind of dive into how this applies to my space apps. So on the left, again, I have my professional developer toolset. And the idea here with Fusion development is that the professional development services are then interfacing with the citizen developers and their Power Platform kind of low code toolset. So the professional developers are using the revision control, using their IDE, and they're creating the Azure services, they're creating the APIs, they are creating the services in Azure, perhaps the infrastructure, and then maybe they're also creating the custom connectors for Power Platform so that the citizen developers can then connect to the services. And we saw a lot about custom connectors in Geetha's presentation also. And then with Fusion development comes Fusion development teams. And so these are our pro developers and our citizen developers. And I want to talk about this a lot because the citizen developers really support the pro developers. The pro developers are technically trained developers. They live in the code. They write code all the time. They write the back ends. They write the front ends. But they are not subject matter experts in everything. So the citizen developers are the subject matter experts. They are the best in their trade. They know their trade very well. And they're also probably tinkerers. They're probably people who are at least a little bit technical. Maybe they like Excel, maybe they like Access, maybe they used to be called Shadow IT. And so for this scenario here, we have our pro devs, and on our space team, our pro devs are the astronauts. And the astronauts are very busy. They are, very highly trained. They are laser focused on flying space shuttles and about everything related to space. They do not have time to learn how to mine an asteroid. So we bring in the citizen developers who are experts in mining and would know how to mine pretty much any material. We form a team with the pro developers and citizen developers together, with the astronauts then supporting the mining team to, prevent the end of the world. And, in the questions, feel free to, ask me anything about Armageddon canon or about plot holes in the movie Armageddon, or, you can tweet me at Linaloo. So let's talk a little bit about space data APIs. And I didn't include Azure Space in here, but that's a whole other really cool thing that we can interface with to make Power Apps. But for right now, I'm kind of talking about more like open source space APIs. So NASA has many, many, many APIs just under their umbrella. So I have created apps before with their near Earth objects API to sort of predict which meteors, might strike or might not strike. Where is the space station is another great space API. And then we have the solar system open data. And finally, SpaceX. And this is specifically the unofficial kind of subreddit SpaceX REST API. And this is what I ended up using for one of my space apps, I should say. It's not the only space app, because the SpaceX API has some really great data on the crew. And I felt like for my app, everything starts with the crew. The crew goes on missions, the crew rides in vehicles, the crew operates the payload. So I would like to start with a crew directory. And then from there, I can, look at some other information. So this is what my very basic app looks like. I have a logic app in Azure that's there, my data parser. That logic app then pulls in data from this open source SpaceX API, and it sends that data out to an Azure function. An Azure function is a function as a service PaaS offering within Azure. And this allows you to run really small bits of code, very specific, almost nano services. And so that's great for parsing data. If I have something that's really big and something that doesn't make sense in logic apps, which is really a workflow, low code tool. And so the two work together really well. They're both in our serverless offering. Now, in front of that, logic apps, their HTTP trigger, I have just sort of wrapped here in this get crew API and API management. And like I said, that offers a layer of abstraction, but also allows me to create these subscription keys so I can have a little bit of extra security for my end users. And then for my Power App, my Power App is then the crew application. So now I'm going to do a little bit of demoing here. So first of all, I just want to show on GitHub what this API is that I'm using. This is unofficial, but it's a really great Node.js API. It's really good documentation, and there's a lot of good information here for my application. So now I'm going to go to the Azure portal. This is my Logic App Designer. If you're not familiar with Logic Apps, it is a low-code workflow and integration tool. It's very, very powerful, and it's very, it's built on top of the same framework as Power Automate. So initially, the trigger for this workflow is this HTTP request. And that URL is what I'm essentially wrapping in API management. So every time this is then triggered, when there's a hit made to the API, then it goes out to SpaceX. It calls this crew query. And then it sends the result of that then to this parse crew data. So the reason I'm parsing is because there's a lot of data that comes back. And really, it's not necessary for my app. And I want my app to be very performant. I really only want it to have the data that it needs. And I want it to be very lightweight. So I really filter out a ton of data there, and I just get kind of what I need. And then finally, there's a response here. And then I'm going to go to my API management instance here. So here I have my subscription keys, like a little bit of added security that I mentioned. And then I also have, this is my meter impacts API, and then I have my R space API. Okay, so here I'm going to just test this API because I just want to give you an idea of what the data looks like that's coming back. And we're getting a few dots because this is indeed a live demo. But this is what the data looks like coming back. So we've got Wikipedia articles, we have lots of images. We have the patch images, we have the images of the astronauts, lots of information, flight numbers, launches, everything that's here. Now, when we want to now connect this to our Power App, we have a couple ways that we can do that. So we can go here to export, and we can export our Open API spec, which is a, essentially a Swagger file. And then we can use that to create a custom connector. Or we can do the better way, which is we actually create the connector here straight from API management. Now, in good cooking show fashion, I've already done that. So I'm going to go over here to my Power Apps environment. And this is a developer environment. So we talked about the developer plan, I think, earlier in some of the talks. And that's what I'm using here for my development, because this Space App is still very much development. So under Dataverse, I have these custom connectors here. I have other connectors for other apps that I'm working on. And this is the one that was created from API management. So I have a choice here. I can go through kind of the definitions here and make some changes, or I could actually just go to my Swagger file. I'm zoomed in here, so this is like not really the best way for it to look at it. But here I have lots of extra information here that I could just edit on the fly if I wanted to and save that. But I like the way it looks. It looks great. So I'm going to go over now to my app. And now in my app, I've made a connection here to the custom API so that I can pull in all of my crew data. And then here is my app. We're just on start here. I am just creating a collection to kind of cache this data that I've then pulled from that custom API. And that's the call there to get the crew. And I'm on the crew list screen right now. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that I thought are really cool. So here, if I expand this gallery, this image here is actually one of the URLs that was in the data. So I just think that's one of the reasons why I want to create a Power App for the data. Because if you look at the data, you can get some information, you can see some math and some numbers and things in there. But the pictures of the astronauts is something that is just really great in this visual setting. So I was really excited to include that in the app. I also have a detail screen here with the Wikipedia article. I have a list of the missions they've been on, and then a lot of data here of the missions. I don't actually know what some of these numbers mean, but I included them because someone, I'm sure, does. And there's lots of information here about the astronaut. So let's look at what the app looks like. So it's showing all of the current SpaceX crew here and all of their great pictures. At the top here, we've got Bob and Doug. They're pretty famous because they had a splashdown, I guess, relatively recently. If I click on the picture here, he only has one mission, 0 failures. And here's the mission here. And I can do this for every single one of my astronauts. And I just get so much information here about all of them. And this app was really pretty simple to build with just this data that I pulled from only one of these space APIs. I mean, the it's really like endless what I could come up with. And now with Azure Space too, that's really going to be my next project. So I'm going to go back here to now to my slides. And if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I will answer. Also, feel free to tweet me. And finally, again, I think we want to just keep pushing everyone to please like explore Fusion development. Even if you're a professional developer like me, I'm really both. I'm the professional developer and I'm the citizen developer. And I like to work with citizen developers because I'm not a subject matter expert in every single industry. So it really, and I think too, developers, we have a lot of backlogs of applications. And the idea of Fusion Teams really opens things up to really be able to fill that gap so that we can create more apps, create more space apps. So yeah, check out the ebook, check out the Cloud Skills Challenge. I've done both of them. Feel free to tweet me about them. Here I am on Twitter, Lina Lu. And I'm really Lina Lu on everywhere on the internet. So feel free to reach out. And thanks a lot for watching my talk.
That was so good. I love the Armageddon analogy.
That was actually pretty perfect. I mean, these Fusion teams, you need people who know the technology in the back end, and you need the citizen devs, the people in the business, in the moment, who know how to get the actual work done and just need the back end support to make it happen. And it's fantastic.
Yeah. You know what I really appreciated about Linda's demo was how she opened with Power Apps are a tool in your toolkit. So if you're not a UI person, like I am not a UI person, once I had to build an Android app, it was a real terrible experience for everyone. Java was fine. The whole build a UI and have these buttons be in specific places and click this button and have this thing, it was a disaster, like an epic disaster. Then everyone's like, use Kotlin. And I'm like, do I still have to learn UI? Yes, you have to learn UI. But what I really appreciate is we want decent looking apps, but we don't know how to make them decent looking, so make Power Apps do it for you.
Exactly.
Right?
I mean, we've always had a lot of developers. If you're a developer and you work on the APIs, you're probably not the same one who is going to be talking about the UI, who's building out the React app or building out the HTML and CSS. Right. So you're going to look for somebody else to do it. And hey, if people can create Power Apps and just talk to your API, it's just another application calling it, and it just works. And for me, I could create a new UI. I'm a web developer, but I want a new app today or maybe tomorrow and not in 3 months. And so this is really where I start almost entirely all the time, 100%, to see if I can do it. And if I need to go the extra mile, I can, but this is where I start because that power is just there for 80, 90% of the kind of things that people look for in their work environment.
He has the power. Okay, actually I have a question for you.
Okay.
Do you want to tell everybody about, everyone's referring to like the ebook and the Fusion Dev Path. And I think Linda's demo really did sum up the Fusion Dev Path really well. Do you want to walk everyone through kind of the demo you made of the factory? Like when Greg and I worked in a factory and he built this really cool demo and a learning path and then the ebook. Do you want to walk everyone through kind of what it covers?
Sure, yeah. So what we looked at was if you were in a manufacturing environment, you're working inside a factory as one of the people responsible to keep those machines running. And if something goes wrong, maybe you have some IoT data feeding in, you're looking at a feed, and you've got a Power BI dashboard to look at all that. Now that Power BI dashboard can be embedded right inside Microsoft Teams so that people can see what's going on, that the management can see it without having to leave their chats and everything else. Now inside Power BI, you can actually embed a Power App inside the dashboard. So what we had was a Power App inside Power BI, which itself was inside Microsoft Teams. And in that Power App, we used a custom connector to get the data that we needed to get some of that kind of legacy data from another application, or sometimes you have like that standard data, which is all the countries you serve, or all the states in the country, or whatever. You can talk to that. And so the custom connector was reaching out, talking Azure Cosmos DB, coming into the Power App, which fed into Power BI, which was then inside Teams. So talk about layers and layers, but it all just worked. And this really came together once the BI dashboard was put in place, and took me a little while because I'm just a BI user myself. the Power App was easy peasy, and everything was, it just, like I said, it just works. The authorization goes all the way through to the bottom layer. Everybody knows who you are, all the way down to Cosmos DB, and it's amazing. So you can get that information, you can get those API calls all within Teams, within Power BI, or just in a Power App in Teams as well.
And then tell them about the learning path. That was really that was for like teams to do, right? Fusion teams.
Right, and so we created a learning path on Microsoft Learn so that people could kind of follow that same path to actually build out that demo, to create the custom connector, create the Power App, get it inside Power BI, and that's all inside Microsoft Learn. And we'll see if I can't get that link in the chat here soon if somebody can't dig it up.
Yeah, and then the ebook is like the story of the why, right? That's like the one where you go put that on your boss's desk and be like, this is why we care about Fusion teams, because they're the future. Okay, so the next demo I'm super excited about because I love IoT things. I can't build them at all. Every time I try to build IoT thing, it ends like with me getting electrocuted. So it's never gone well, 0 times. But I am very, very excited to see what Eric builds for us.
Yeah, I am super excited to see it. I know myself, I have a stack of IoT things sitting on my desk that I'm super going to build something for one day.
Someday, exactly. But now we're going to have Power Platform and IoT. Over to you, Eric.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Greg. And hello and welcome everyone to Introduction to Azure IoT Central. If you're joining us live, please feel free to use the chat to ask any questions you may have. Alternatively, you can contact me via email, social media, or you can also find me on the Microsoft Power Automate community forums, where I enjoy helping everyone learn more about Power Platform. My name is Eric Chang, and I'm a digital solutions architect at Komatsu Australia. I've been working with Microsoft low-code and pro-code technologies for over 15 years across Office 365, business applications, and Azure. I'm a Microsoft certified architect, DevOps engineer, Power Platform maker, and trainer. So the goal for today is to really provide you with an introduction to Azure IoT Central. We'll talk a little bit about IoT and what are the challenges around designing and building an enterprise-grade IoT solution. We'll then discuss how Azure IoT Central can simplify that entire process and really is democratizing IoT for everyone. We'll then go into IoT Central and demonstrate the type of solutions that you can build using IoT Central, Dynamics 365, and the Power Platform. So firstly, what is IoT? IoT, or the Internet of Things, refers to a network of connected devices that can send and receive data over the internet. So imagine being able to connect and interface with everyday physical devices and take data from these devices into the digital space, where you can then store, analyze, and transform them into actionable insights. IoT is already leading transformation across a number of industry verticals, from healthcare, agriculture, energy, oil and gas, and manufacturing, as an example. There's so many possibilities when it comes to IoT, with use cases around smart buildings and cities, autonomous vehicles, remote monitoring, and predictive maintenance. And no wonder it's predicted that by 2025, there'll be over 41 billion connected devices worldwide. However, despite this number, 70% of IoT initiatives fail. So why do you think that is? Well, when we talk about designing and building an enterprise-grade IoT solution, it starts with data on a device. But there's much more than that. We have to think about how we're going to connect to our application from our devices. We also need to think about how we're going to manage our devices across the life cycle. Once you've connected to the device, how are you going to store, process, and analyze this data? What's your presentation layer to visualize this data? And more importantly, how are you going to deliver actionable insights to your end users on the systems and applications that they use most? There's also important things like security, and also, as your solution and number of devices grow, scalability and disaster recovery. So there's a lot to think about. And fortunately, Azure provides many options and services that enables IoT solution builders to build their applications. And that really leads us to Azure IoT Central. which simplifies the whole process of selecting a device, connecting to your device, and extracting value from the data of your device. IoT Central is offered as a SaaS solution. It's built on top of Azure IoT Hub, as well as an ecosystem of other various Azure services. The great thing about IoT Central is that it abstracts away all that complexity I mentioned earlier of designing, building, and maintaining secure enterprise-grade IoT infrastructure, and really just lets organizations focus on transforming the business with IoT rather than be burdened by it. Another great thing about IoT Central is that it allows solution builders to extend and customize the standard functionality with little or no code. And we'll see how we can do this very shortly. So from here, there are two scenarios which I'd like to go through. First, I'll introduce you to the IoT device that I'll be using, and then we'll move on to rules and actions. We'll look at how we can use rules to monitor the events coming in from our device and trigger actions such as creating an IoT alert into connected field service. In a second scenario, we'll take that further and look at extending IoT Central to stream data out to other Azure services and perform real-time anomaly detection using machine learning. Again, we'll integrate that with Dynamics 365 and close off the loop and send work order updates back into our IoT Central application. So with this, let's flick over to our IoT Central application where I can show you my device and talk about device templates. Device templates are one of the key concepts of IoT Central. They let your application know about what type of device you're connecting with, and also what your device is capable of. Microsoft provides a diverse library of Microsoft plug-and-play certified devices, as you can see. And the idea here is that you can purchase one of these devices off the shelf, connect it to the internet, and really start sending data to your application straight away without manual configuration, without worrying about device compatibility and developing firmware. At the heart of each device template is the device model, which is a JSON representation of your device using the digital twin definition language. The device model describes the capabilities of your device, the telemetry that your device can send, the properties that your device can store, and also any commands that your device can receive and execute. So the benefit of using an IoT plug-and-play certified device is that when you select a template, your IoT application already knows about your device and what it's capable of. This device template is also customizable. You can add additional capabilities, and you can also add additional cloud properties like I've done here. I've created a number of additional properties such as work order number, status, scheduled date, and technician name, and I'll be using these to store information from Dynamics in one of my later examples. So, Lamont, let's bring up our IoT device and show everyone what we're going to be using for our demos. So the device I'm going to be using is the MX chip. It's a Microsoft plug-and-play certified device, and it contains onboard sensors for temperature, humidity, pressure, and also motion. It's currently powered up and sending data to my IoT Central application, and it's sending telemetry about every 5 seconds. So now that I've introduced you to my device, I want to move on to our first scenario, which are rules and actions. So rules in IoT Central allows you to monitor the events coming in and then trigger an action when a certain condition is met. So here I've created a simple sensor overheating rule. So let's drill down into this rule and see what it's currently doing. When you create a rule, you have to target your devices. And we do this by associating a rule with a device template. You can still target an individual device within this template or groups of device by specifying additional filters. Next are conditions, which are the statements which must be met or satisfied in order for your rule to be triggered. You can create a sliding window, which will aggregate your telemetric values. You can also add multiple conditions to stack using an and or statement. So in my condition, I'm simply looking for events where the temperature is greater than 20 degrees. Quite simple. But depending on your requirements, you can also create other telemetric conditions. For example, if your device has GPS capabilities, you could use the device location to create a geofencing rule to notify you or trigger an action when an asset is leaving a geofence location. The last part of my rule are actions. Actions are what you want to happen when a condition is met. In IoT Central, you can create actions to send an email, call a webhook or an API endpoint, or an Azure Action Group. My favorite are Logic Apps and Power Automate because they provide you with a powerful low-code way of connecting your IoT Central application with your other line of business systems and applications. So what I'm going to do here is to enable my rule. And whilst this is starting up, I'm going to go and jump to the Power Automate Cloudflow, which is at the center of this integration. So this Cloudflow is quite simple. The trigger is based off the IoT Central version 3 connector. So the IoT Central version 3 connector is one of the hundreds of connectors available on the Power Platform. And this particular connector contains many actions that allows you to interface with your IoT Central application, from managing devices, managing properties, accessing telemetry, and even executing commands on your device. This Cloudflow will monitor the sensor overheating rule we saw earlier within my IoT Central application. Once triggered, it will go and create a new record in IoT Alerts table in my Dataverse environment. It will also go and add in some additional parameters to provide context to my user from within Connected Field Service. So let's go and go over to Connected Field Service and have a look at the alert that should be generated. So in our Connected Field Service, I'm going to go to Primary Alerts and do a refresh. So in Primary Alerts, we can see the primary alert which has now been created by our rule. And the primary alert is really just a roll-up of all the individual active alerts relating to each event for this device against this rule. If we click on the primary alert, we can see all the associated information, including the time that the alert was triggered, the device that triggered the rule, and the customer asset that was associated with the IoT device. We can also see the telemetric value or properties of our event, including any cloud properties, as well as the temperature of the device at the time that the rule was triggered. So I've shown you how easy it is to use rules in action to monitor your events and trigger an action to create an IoT alert. However, in our example, we had a hard-coded temperature, and depending on your requirements, it may not be as possible to convert your requirement into a condition. What if you didn't know what an abnormal temperature is? What if you wanted to use machine learning to perform anomaly detection to create IoT alerts? With IoT Central, Azure, and also the Power Platform, you can do all of that, again, with little and no code. So look at how you would do this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back into IoT Central and look at data exports. So data exports are a feature or function within IoT Central that allows you to monitor and take your events coming into your application, but this time enrich it, so add additional information to it, and then push those events to other Azure services as part of your IoT solution. So to set up a data export, we first need to set up a destination, which will let your application know where in Azure you want to send these alerts to or events to. So currently IoT Central supports various destinations from blob storage, event hubs, service bus, and also API endpoints or webhooks. So here I've already set up a destination to an event hub. And the idea here is that my events will come into my application, get exported to my Event Hub, which I'll then stream to an anomaly detection service that I'll walk through very quickly. Once you've set up your destination, you can set up an export job, which will allow you to specify the data you want to export. You can specify any enrichments. So enrichments allow you, as I mentioned, to add information or properties to your events so that you can access these same properties and data later downstream. And finally, the destination, where you want to set it to. I'm going to go and enable this export job. And once this is enabled, what's going to happen is the events are going to come from my device to my application. It's going to get enriched with these two properties, and it's going to get exported to my Event Hub, which will then act as an input to Azure Stream Analytics. So let's go over to Azure Stream Analytics and see what that's all about. Azure Stream Analytics is a fully managed analytics and processing service. It's used to analyze and process large streams of data. But one of the great things I like about Azure Stream Analytics is that it contains out-of-the-box machine learning capabilities. This is great because it allows organizations who may not have the data science expertise or really the time and resource to create, train, and maintain custom machine learning models. But it still allows them to experience the benefit of real-time anomaly detection. So in my Stream Analytics job, I've set up an input, which is the Event Hub, which is also the destination we saw earlier. And the events are going to come into my service and pass into this query. So this query looks very similar to SQL, if you're familiar. And all it's really doing is it's calling the spike and dip function. The spike and dip function is one of the two out-of-the-box machine learning anomaly detection functions available in Stream Analytics. And this function takes in 4 parameters. The first parameter is the value you want to detect anomalies with, so the temperature, a confidence level, which you can adjust up and down to tune your sensitivity of your model, the number of events to train your model, and also whether you want to detect both spikes and dips or one or the other. This function will then return 2 outputs, a p-value score between 0 and 1 to determine a flag of whether that event is an anomaly or not. What I'm doing in this query then is to take all the events which has been classified as an anomaly and passing that into an output sync. And this output is a service bus queue, which, you guess it, I have a Power Automate Cloudflow monitoring that queue to create an IoT alert. So what I'm going to do here is I need to go and trigger my anomaly detector to be able to detect that anomaly. And the easiest way to do that, or quickest way to do that, is to use my hairdryer here to blast hot air into my IoT device, heat it up so that my anomaly detector will detect that anomaly. So I'm going to go on mute for about 5 seconds because it's going to get a little bit loud. Okay, so I've heated up my device for about 5 seconds. Before I go into Connected Field Service to have a look at my device, what I want to do is go back to IoT Central and have a look at what's actually been happening with my device. If I click on my device, I can see that the green line is the temperature. It's definitely experienced a spike in temperature. So you can see it started off at 29 degrees and it went up to 44 degrees, so that's good. If we look at the raw value, it's definitely gone up. And again, before I go into my Connected Field Service, I'm going to go to the Cloudflow, which is at the center of that integration. So this cloud flow looks very similar to the one in the rule in action example. The only key difference here is that I'm using a service bus queue to monitor my anomaly queue. I've got a pass JSON action to extract some key data that I need from my my service bus message. And then I'm using the same Dataverse connector to create an IoT alert in the IoT alerts table. And I'm again providing just some information to this alert to provide information to the user. So let's go over to Connected Field Service. Go back to the IoT alert screen. And you can see now I have a temperature sensor anomaly detected alert. If we click into it, we can see the time that it was triggered. We can see the device. We can see the temperature. And also we can see the score from our anomaly detector. So now I've shown you how we can take events from our device into IoT Central, export it to other services within Azure to perform anomaly detection, to create an alert back into Connected Field Service. So to round up now is to go through the business to convert this into a work order and show you how we can send work order updates back into IoT Central against this device. So the first step is to just create a case. So this is a standard business process flow from Connected Field Service. And I'm just going to go and step through the process to get the work order created. So once we've created the case, we're going to just give it an incident type. We're going to go and create the work order. Again, I'm just going to specify the mandatory details. And save. So this should now create a work order. I should get a work order number, and I should be able to see the status of this work order as unscheduled. Great. So now my work order is number 5. It's currently unscheduled. So if I go back into IoT Central and go to Overview, you can see I now have a work order number of 5. It's currently set to unscheduled. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back into Connected Field Service and assign a technician and schedule a technician on the job. So whilst we're waiting, I currently have a technician that I know is pretty hardworking. So let's zoom in. And we're going to just set him on the 15th. Set some times. And exit. So if we now go and move this to the next stage of our business process flow, we can now see that the status has now been set to scheduled. And if I now go back to my IoT Central application, the device has also been scheduled. The scheduled date has been updated to the 15th with the technician name. So before I wrap up, I just quickly want to go through the final Power Automate Cloud Flow. So this one's a little bit more complicated. It has a trigger for Dataverse to monitor my work orders table, and it will look for added or new or modified work orders. I will then go into the work order to get the IoT alert associated with that work order, and I'll get the device because we need the device ID to reference the IoT device in IoT Central. What I then do is check the status of the work order, and depending on the status, I will either update some properties against my device, or I search for the booking, and depending if I find the booking, let's scroll over, I will update different properties of the device. So this concludes my session for today, Introduction to Azure IoT Central. I hope you found it both interesting and informative. Please complete the Fusion Development Cloud Skills Challenge and download the Fusion Dev ebook. Stay, keep learning. Thank you.
I love that. He did not electrocute himself.
Better than I would have done, that's
I know.
for sure.
As soon as he pulls out the hairdryer, I'm like, Greg, this is where it happens. He was all going great until you pull out a hairdryer, and we were going, nope, but it didn't happen. No fiascos. Okay, I really want to share with you this one video from the Power School. Have you heard about it?
I have, and honestly, it is amazing. This Power Platform School and what they're doing just to get all this information out there is fantastic.
Especially to underserved communities. So let's cue to that video.
What the Power Platform School is, it's an initiative that I came up with that allows Black ethnic people to enter into tech. I put this together to basically give people the opportunity that I know they don't feel that they have, because they do.
Being involved in this project and being able to actually change lives and show people what they can actually do is really, really exciting for me.
If you see other people out there that look like you, that are doing something that you think you might not be able to do, then it kind of makes you think that you can also do it.
When you see the students start to put all the pieces of the Power Platform together, and once you have that aha, that click moment of everything's connected, like you can build these super cool, intricate apps. That part is really, really awesome to watch.
When a mentee gets a job and they get that job offer, I think that actually is my favorite moment.
Yeah.
Man, I'll tell you, that school really is something else. It's fantastic what they're doing. And when I talk about the Power Platform community, this exactly is what I'm talking about. What do you think, Donna?
Yeah, you know, I say it over and over. I think Power Platform community is the best community in the world because they really take care of each other. And they take care of people who are in the community, but they're always looking to expand it to include new people. So I really hope those of you watching the event today, that if you are not already a part of the Power Addicts community, you do that. We actually have a program called One Power Addict in Every Country in the World, where we are determined that we have a Power Addict in, well, every country in the world. And we have them in, I want to say like 80 countries, but not 200. And we would love to have a Power Addict in 200 countries. So if you're tuning in, hit us up, drop a note in the chat about where you're from, which country you're tuning in from, because April is actively running around and collecting all of your info and putting it into a Power App, because we would love to show a big map of the world with your name on it, showing where you're from.
We want to know you're out there. Absolutely.
Exactly. Plus, when we can get on planes again, I want to come see you.
I'd be happy to just get on a plane again,
I know,
honestly,
exactly,
but hey,
exactly,
let's not go there.
exactly. Do you think April has the VPs wrangled somewhere?
I think she does, and honestly, it's one of the great jobs. If you could get your boss to sit down, your boss's boss's boss, let's be honest, and ask them all the hard questions about why are we bothering with this? What it really is this story, and who's actually out there using it?
Right.
Well, April was living that dream. I'm a little jealous.
I know, and I've asked her to ask them about roadmap stuff, because all of you are always asking us, okay, what's next, what's coming? And she, I think, is going to ask them that question, and I hope we get some answers. Over to you, April.
Hey, Donna, thanks. Wow, this has been an amazing event. So many great technical sessions from our MVPs and community members. I know I've learned a lot, so hopefully everyone else has as well. So I'm super happy to join two special friends with me to close out this event and expand on what we learned today. So let's welcome Amanda Silver and Charles Lamana. Hey, you two, how are you doing?
Great, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining. Yeah, thank you for joining us. So I thought I would just kind of set the stage here, kick this off, and I'd like to kind of bring it around to what we talked about earlier today a little bit with Scott and the concept of fusion teams. So we heard a lot, so far about custom connectors and controls and ALM and so many great talks today. So I wanted to circle back on fusion teams and talk about and get your impact and your insight here on what these fusion teams are, why they're important, and why code-first developers should start embracing fusion development.
Well, I mean, to me, I think of everything in the context of the developer shortage. Globally, we actually don't have enough developers to meet the demand of all the digital solutions that are being asked of us. And so I think as a result, it means that basically certain apps aren't getting created and organizations aren't operating as efficiently as they possibly could. And that means that basically we're not achieving everything that we could possibly achieve. And so from my perspective, I come from the professional developer world. I've been working on tools for professional developers for decades at this point. And I always am looking at kind of what's being asked of developers. And what I've seen consistently for the last 20 years is that they're always overtaxed. They always have more that's being asked of them than what they're capable of doing. They're always working with a finite team that has limited capacity and resources, but there's always more than enough opportunity. And I think over the last couple of years, we've seen an absolute surge in demand for digital solutions. And so when I think about a Fusion team, I think that it's basically a ProDev team empowering a set of people who are not professional developers to create digital solutions.
And what's really amazing about technology over the last few decades is that it's always being brought to more and more users over time, getting further democratized with a PC on every desk and a phone in every pocket. And what's interesting is that it's historically always been about the consumption and use of software by everybody. But what's amazing with tools like the Power Platform and low-code development, we're making it possible for everybody in the world to participate and contribute to the development of new solutions. And that's really what we find so exciting about the emergence of these low-code tools and technologies, is that you can have this broad base of users who used to only be focused on the consumption of software, give back and create and develop. And if you go look at the enterprise, we're seeing the emergence of the Fusion teams as part of that. We're seeing professional developers and coders use things like IDEs and the standard development environments to go build components and building blocks which show up for all of those low-code developers out there inside of a highly immersive, visual, connected, and integrated experience. And this interplay back and forth between the low-code developers and the pro-code developers is what Fusion teams are all about. And this type of enablement and this type of creativity is the only way we can address that app gap that Amanda was talking about earlier. It's really the only way we can go build the 500 million new apps that we need for every company in every industry around the globe over the next couple of years. And if we kind of go look where this really is going in the future, what's exciting is that we're going to see all these ProDev tools start to show up inside and integrated with these low-code offerings capabilities too. And with that, I kind of have a question for Amanda, which would be, what type of tools and capabilities and environments are you really seeing the Fusion teams pick up and adopt when it comes to these types of low-code environments?
Well, I think one of the things that we're definitely seeing in terms of how Fusion teams are empowering each other is that there's a little bit of a standard pattern that's emerging, and it really centers on APIs. When we think about web APIs, that really is the way that you can kind of create a small morsel of functionality for your application and then expose it for other developers to be able to use, whether they're professional developers or they're developers who have maybe not that might not be their title, developer. They might be business analyst or something like that, but they're creating solutions for their end users. API become the common language. And so what we're seeing is that they're starting to basically build APIs, often by virtue of kind of creating what we would call microservices, but basically a little bit of functionality that they might implement using something like Azure Functions or Azure App Service. And then they expose it as a web API that professional developers or citizen developers might be able to consume. And they can actually control access to that API using something like Azure API Management, so that they can control, who's able to call it, how many times. They can have, throttling and things like that, as well as like RBAC controls, so that they can limit who actually has access to be able to call that API. So you still get all of the security that you would, expect of a professional developer to create, but you're empowering these non-professional developers or people who might not have developer in their job title to create solutions for their end users. And what I really love about all of this is that it's basically empowering people who are closer to the business, closer to the usage of the solution that's getting built, to be empowered to create these kinds of solutions. So Charles, that actually brings me to you. Like, what's your favorite example of somebody of a Fusion team actually creating this kind of application?
Yes, so I'd say I have lots of favorites. So there's definitely a Hall of Fame somewhere in my house of all the amazing Fusion team stories. But one of the ones that I just heard a couple of weeks ago was from Rabobank, and they're a Dutch financial organization, which is really exciting in terms of supporting sustainability initiatives as well as agriculture. So a lot of, I'd say, good mission as part of being a bank over time as well. And we met with them, and they actually walked us through how they really embrace this idea of Fusion teams inside the bank. And what's great is that they have professional developers and IT pros who build those common APIs, those common components that you were talking about earlier, Amanda, which are then being picked up and leveraged by all the low-code developers across the entire bank. And these are business users, people in finance, people in accounting or compliance. They're the ones building the solutions, leveraging all these great little microservices and little bits and pieces that really unlock super powerful and compelling experiences inside of the Power Platform and inside of low-code tools. And what I really found super interesting was two things about the approach that they took. The first is that they built application lifecycle management, or ALM, into their approach from day one. So not only did they have these little bits and pieces that people could use, but they also had an amazing story for how you could build a solution inside of pre-production, go through QA, and then ultimately publish it to production. And even how you could go support it and report tickets and issues over time. And this kind of full lifecycle approach to manage these applications is a great way to really unlock the potential of all the business users out there through the ProDev expertise and ProDev capabilities that you have. Because things like a software development lifecycle or ALM aren't super common. You don't run into that when you build an Excel document or a PowerPoint presentation. So finding the right way to introduce these concepts to those end users is super critical for a broad-based, very successful deployment. So that was item number one.
Well, let me just touch on that point for a second, because I love that aspect of the Power Platform. You know, as a professional developer, I think there's so many times that we've heard stories of people building an Excel application. Essentially, they had a spreadsheet and it kind of got out of control because it basically became the spreadsheet that the business operated on, and it started getting shared to, you know, hundreds of people within the organization. And by the time they realized that it was actually a business critical application, it got moved to central IT. Central IT is looking at it and like, what do I do with this? I don't necessarily know, you know, everybody who's using it. I don't know how to update it. I don't know how to basically get it out there. And what I love about, you know, the Power Platform and the approach that we're taking here is that you can do things like application lifecycle management from the beginning. You can empower these folks to create these applications that maybe central IT doesn't necessarily know about the instant it's created, but it's created in such a way that you can actually manage policy around, you know, what does that lifecycle management actually look like? And as the application gets used more and more in the organization, and it has to scale to the demand of the way that the organization is using it, it can actually become integrated and managed through central IT as well.
Yeah. And whenever we go talk to customers who've been on a low code journey, maybe for 20 years or so with a different technology in the past, pre-cloud, pre-mobile, this is a thing that always comes up, which is how do you go, if you are successful with low code development, what then? How do you go support it and manage it over time? So having this up front and having it actually done by developers who understand SDLC just makes companies like Rabobank super successful with this Fusion team idea. And the second one is a great component as well, the same idea that Amanda was talking about, which is this idea of DevSecOps, and basically how do you go inject security and compliance and all those checks as part of that application lifecycle management process. As folks that work in regulated industries like financial services or healthcare or public sector and government know, there's a lot of requirements around how you can manage and leverage data. But what's great is that by actually embracing the standard rollout process to go from pre-production to production, Rabobank and its developers and IT professionals were able to ensure that the right security checks were in place. And that is just as important in this day and age as whether or not an app works, is also whether or not that app is secure. And that's kind of been a journey that we've been really focused on at Microsoft, is not only making it super easy to build out these solutions, but make it easy to secure them and manage and operate them. So just a great example of kind of that interplay between business users and coders and IT professionals, really as the three legs of the stool, which prop up this idea of building the next wave and the next huge number of digital solutions that every company needs to be successful moving forward. And I'm sure, Amanda, you have your own favorite story that you can share. So I'd love to hear that as well.
Well, I think the one that comes to mind for me most recently is the Western States Caterpillar organization, which actually it's not a huge organization. It's about 900 employees, and what they do is they manage Caterpillar, utility tractors and things like that that are used in construction in Wyoming and Montana and Idaho. And they basically kind of operate like a rental service for these machines, along with like servicing and parts and other things like that. And so they kind of have a business managing all of these machines for everybody. And they had an IT department, but they still had all this friction in terms of the operations of what it actually looked like to service and to return and to rent all of these different tractors and other utilities. And so they ended up focusing on what were the biggest points of friction in the operations of their business. And one of the big pieces of feedback that they got from their team was that the process of returning a vehicle back to their depot was really onerous. And so they worked on something called the Return to Ready application, which basically takes a vehicle as it's coming back, and it allows the service person to be able to put in all of the details around mileage and any damage and pictures and other things like that. And they implemented it using a low-code mobile application with the Power Apps tool. And it also created additional events and timestamps that they weren't getting from other solutions. But what I really love about this story is that, first of all, it was done initially from the strategy and BI team, which actually sits much more close to the executive team of the organization. And that team actually worked on basically what do they need to build for their organization? And the way that they did it I just love this story because of the customer empathy. What they did is they actually brought in the folks who would be using the application into their store, and they listened to them, and they actually co-created the application with the end users in the store as they were doing development of the application. And they also went on ride-alongs with the folks who are driving the trucks that move a lot of these vehicles to the sites and locations that they need to go, because they're also going to end up being users of these applications. And so what I love about this is that, the potential of this low-code solution to empower folks to actually go and connect with their end users and to create solutions that are more powerful, that are actually more effective in terms of what the organization needs. Now, the next part is that they do have a central IT team, even though their organization is only about 900 people. And the central IT team uses tools like Visual Studio to create those APIs that the strategy and BI team uses to create these mobile applications. And so it's really this central IT organization collaborating very closely with the strategy and BI team that's focused on operations and kind of, output and outcomes for the organization. So I just love that story, mainly because of the fact that the low-code tools empowered this organization to achieve efficiencies, but also through customer empathy.
And I think that's what's so exciting about bringing those business users into the fold to actually participate and contribute to the solutions is who better to actually tell you what they need for a digital solution than the people that would use it every day for the next 5 years. So, and that type of kind of interplay is what makes it so exciting to have the Fusion team, not just from a technical efficiency perspective, but like you said, Amanda, customer empathy, really understanding the business process you want to improve with technology, have the people who actually would use that technology. So, So all super exciting.
Right.
And another thing I'd like want to say, which I really liked about that one, is how there is a role for so many different parts of the company. Because what's really important is low code doesn't mean that developers go away. It just means there's a different way for some solutions to be built. And the low code developer in the business and the pro coder in IT and the BI specialist, all three of them are actually more productive, more effective, more employable, and even more in demand than ever before because of this concept of the fusion team. So that type of ability to go create more responsibility and more opportunity is just what technology's been doing forever. That's the theme of everything I've been saying today. Is it's been 40 years of more apps, more automation, more workflow, more BI, more chat experience. The same thing is happening, just starting to reach out into those business users at the same time.
Yeah. And I think, that's a great story of kind of achieving efficiencies inside the operations of an organization. But I also love the story from IKEA, which actually allowed them to capture net new business through low-code solutions. In this example, they basically had exactly the story what we were talking about earlier, where they had an Excel spreadsheet that had gotten out of control in terms of, it was an Excel spreadsheet that had been standardized for the organization to do, custom kitchen plan outs. And I don't know if have you ever remodeled your kitchen, Charles?
I have not, but I have a lot of IKEA in my house.
I have remodeled my kitchen, and it is quite an arduous process. And I can definitely understand if that's kind of your regular day job. That has to be an absolutely complex nightmare to manage. And, I think what's cool about that example is they really saw an opportunity to get into more of the business of managing custom kitchen build outs with IKEA solutions. But their Excel spreadsheets didn't deliver consistent communication with their customers. There was no mobility. So when they were out in the field on visits, or they were even in the stores, they didn't have access to all of the information that they needed to kind of make the sale. They had no role-based security. And so everybody had the same access to the spreadsheets. And there was just lots of complex information that they needed to manage. These kitchen build outs can take months to complete. And there's so many different, parts for the kitchen that you need to be able to create. But in this case, this allowed their sales team to actually create more of a human-to-human connection. And as a result, they were having a conversation about what the customer was really excited about, which is their future kitchen, as opposed to having to fight with technology to be able to have that conversation. And the other thing that I love about this is that, they heavily used Azure to actually accelerate the solution as well. So they used Azure Logic Apps to actually create a summary of the customer meeting after the fact, so they could send it in an email to the customer with quotes and other things that actually made more of a connection with the customer. They used Azure Functions to do things like scheduling. There might be times that the business is closed for the weekend, or there's a local holiday, or other things like that. Azure Functions is a perfect example of something that you can use for those kinds of jobs that can be scheduled, that's appropriate with your particular business. They used Azure Blob Storage to actually persist all of the data. And that also helped them secure the data. So really the apps had the access to be able to access the data. And you had to be able to access the data, you had to use these apps so that no single person could actually access any customer data. So it had validated security roles in all of that. And then everything was stored in Azure Key Vault. All of the credentials, all of the access keys, everything related to security is all stored in Azure Key Vault. But all of this was exposed through, APIs that are then they can then use in the Power Apps that they then created these mobile applications that really allowed their sales team in the kitchens department to actually create, the kitchen of your dreams.
That's super awesome. And I like within the Power Platform team, we have a mantra we always talk about, which is this idea of no cliffs with low code development, which is you're never going to run off a cliff when you want some more complexity. And, there's a famous saying from Apple of there's an app for that on the phone. It's kind of like whenever you hit like an edge or a cliff inside of the Power Platform, there's an Azure service for that. You want to write some code, Azure Functions. You want to call an API, Azure API Management. You want events, Azure Event Hub. just there's hundreds of amazing capabilities that you can always drop into from the Power Platform into Azure, and you're never going to run out of gas when you're trying to build out these solutions. And that the IKEA example is super cool in terms of just pulling all the different pieces together to go build such a transformative application experience, but without being stuck or dogmatic about one piece of technology. It's not low code or pro code, it's both. That's kind of the big thing we keep talking about. So very, very exciting to hear that.
So how do you think people are going to create apps, in the future? Like, what do you think is the what do you see for the next couple of years of app creation?
So I'm obviously going to be biased by that, but I'd say I think you're going to see more and more low code development, and like what low code means is going to change. Like today, low code means very narrowly like a drag and drop visual experience to build apps, to build bots, to build chat experience or BI dashboards and reports. That's kind of what low code means. But what's amazing is it's going to stretch to be more about composition and leveraging higher order building blocks. And I expect that we'll start to see the emergence of all kinds of like all-in-one services and capabilities to do things like commerce or like a retail footprint, like what you see with some of the e-commerce solutions out there. Or you're going to start to see it for things like payments, like what Stripe has done, which is pretty remarkable, or Twilio does. You're just going to see this prevalence of higher order services, APIs, and capabilities, which will be assembled by low-code developers and pro-code developers to quickly build these amazing solutions as fast as possible. And the same force that Amanda started the chat with, the same idea of just unparalleled and unprecedented demand for digital solutions and developers is going to drive this as well. Because instead of having every company rebuild, how do I compute tax code? How do I do scheduling of physical assets? How do I interpret IoT signals? You're just going to go look for something off the shelf, which you can compose with code and with low code and with no code to get the job done as fast as possible. So kind of, it's never been a better time to be a developer in terms of jobs, opportunities, and career, but also it's never been a better time to be a developer in terms of the amazing collection of things you can leverage to get your job done faster. You've come a long way from assembly or even programming languages. We're in this new era of API catalogs and AI catalogs and PaaS services and SaaS services. I think that's really going to be the defining trait for development over the next few years. And I think everybody's going to benefit, anybody that's involved in the developer economy.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Yeah, I have to flip that around and say, Amanda, what do you think? Yeah.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I think the trends that you're describing, we also see in the pro developer world, around there being SaaS services, SaaS APIs that complete a particular function. You talked about tax codes as an example, that there's so many instances where developers are great general purpose, jack of all trades capable and, lifelong learners. That's one of the reasons why I love working for developers is because, they're always excited about learning a new technology, but learning a tax code for a certain, region of the world, that's something that, I think they don't really love doing. And so if there's an API that can be abstracted to allow them to build that into the functionality of their application without them having to get into the current tax code and managing that, of course they're going to use it. All developers are really resourceful. They basically know when they're writing code that only they can write, that's the code that's unique to them and to their organization, and what's the code that is boilerplate and probably better implemented by somebody who's an expert in that domain. And so I think a lot of what you're talking about in terms of ready-made APIs that developers can use is something that we're going to see in pure ProDev solutions. But it's also something that will empower low-code tools as well. Because many of these applications rely on those kinds of things, whether it's something that does scheduling, something that deals with tax codes, something that deals with holidays or various different domains. I think that's an example of something that a low code developer, app creator can use to make their app better more quickly.
Absolutely. Like there's an API for that. That's going to be the mantra of the future.
Exactly.
And when we talk about low code, we say the emergence of SaaS and the API economy is what transformed the low code market over the last 5 years, because every little solution you build, whether it's in BI or workflows, like with Power Automate or Power BI or Power Apps, it can connect to all your existing data. That wasn't as possible 10 years ago. And it all starts from API. So amazing times.
Yeah. And I think there's an aspect of that in terms of the platform that we're building. You know, all of the connectors that are available to you. Not only can you connect to the various different Microsoft or Azure services or Power App services, Power Platform services, you can also connect to, external APIs like from Stripe or from, SAP or other organizations that are providing solutions for you.
Awesome.
Well,
this
awesome.
is
I think April. Yeah, sorry. So April's giving us the we're going over time.
Yeah, No, this is I could talk all day about this stuff and listen to you both talk about it. It's been really great to hear your insights on Fusion development and the future of development. Definitely an exciting time to be a developer for sure. I do have one more final question for the both of you though before we call it quits here. So when we're talking about people here that want to get started, so first of all, what are some, as Donna would like to say, some homework that you want to leave everyone, or some calls to action for those itching to get started with building on top of the Power Platform?
Well, I think, one of the first places that I recommend everybody get started is just looking for the Power Apps developer plan. It's something that we came out with pretty recently, and it allows you to create flows and apps, and actually share them with others. And it basically works for anything that's kind of pre-production. And you can also connect to data sources, whether that's in Azure or it's in Dynamics 365 or custom APIs or like the 400 premium connectors that we were talking about earlier. And, you can also create environments that allow you to kind of stage developer, dev, test and production. And as we were talking about earlier, you can manage the entire application lifecycle with this as well. So you can have continuous integration, continuous deployment. And what's also super cool is that you can also connect to the Dataverse. And so that means that you can use all of the, custom data schemas, all of the business, the common, types that people have in various different types of business applications. You can actually access those without having to write a bunch of new data schema for your application.
Yeah, Dataverse. No, and I think the only thing I would add on top of that is like just get started. If you haven't used the Power Platform or haven't used some of the Pro Code extensibility, just get started and give it a try. You can get started with everything for free. If you've used Power Apps and Visual Studio, try out Power BI, maybe play with Azure Synapse. Go try out some new services across that spectrum, because the future of solutions is going to use it all. It's going to use a bunch of different Azure services and a bunch of different Power Platform services. And if you hear that and say, oh, well, I've already used all of it, well, then reach out to us. We have a bunch of cool private previews, which will gladly loop you in, but you have to first use everything in the Power Platform and as much as you can in Azure as well. So.
Yes, and piggyback on that, definitely check out the developer plans. You can get started building solutions, just seeing what's possible. We have great learning paths for Fusion development that you can check out as well. So be sure to give that a look. And I want to end with thanking you both, Amanda and Charles. This has been so much fun, a great event here. I've learned a ton. It's been great listening to you talk. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. All right. Well, back to you, Donna and Greg.
That was so great. Okay.
It was fantastic.
Do you think we should end every conference with Charles and Amanda having this unplugged session? Whoever thinks so, drop an I in the chat, because I think that was just great.
I mean, it's amazing. And honestly, talking about the customers that are really doing the thing out there. They're building those apps. And the one that spoke to me was building an app with a customer right next to you.
Right.
I can't write code like C# whatever with my manager next to me, with my dog next to me. I can't do it. Never mind a customer. A Power App, no problem. That's what we talk about when we talk about accelerating our developers and their productivity.
The Caterpillar people, right? The cat truck, whatever it's called. I just thought that was such deep customer empathy like, yeah, ride along, like learn what their job is actually, and do actual field work to truly understand what your citizen dev needs to be able to build custom code for them. It's so cool.
It is, and that's that citizen dev thing, really, from top to bottom. You've got your customer who knows that data, who knows their job, the problem they're trying to solve, and what they need cold. You got your maker who can do the Power App, who can build the UI, who can work with the customer to get exactly what they want, and then work with the code-first developers in the back end for those APIs, for the data layers, for all that business logic stuff that us developers know super, super well. And it all just works together to get these applications out there, which, let's face it, applications are needed everywhere for everything all the time. And there's a giant shortage of developers, of me, of Donna, of everybody, just to get these things built.
I know. So what did he say? 150 million dev shortage, million people dev shortage. 150 million with an M. That's a lot. Right now we have 2. We can probably get Cameron and Ryan, so that's 4. And then we got like Charles and Amanda in April, so that's 9. We're missing a lot of developers.
Yeah, there's about 150 million more
that we need to get. And by the way, the number of companies who reach out to us constantly asking where we can find more developers, they're like, where do you find more devs? We're like, we grow them in your organization. That's what you do, you grow them. You go to your HR department, your legal, finance, operations. I happen to work in a legal department right now, and I'm determined to turn everybody in my org, if you're watching, into citizen devs. It's happening.
Absolutely. It can happen everywhere inside an organization, and these things can be connected. You can build an app to talk to 5 different legacy systems and streamline a process that's been taking forever, and make it easy for your users. These kinds of things are so easy to put together.
I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you for tuning into Powerful Dev, 2nd year in a row. We hope you learned things. If you have questions, drop them in the chat. Find us on Twitter.
Absolutely.
We're really findable. Reach out to any of the speakers. They dropped all of their contact info because they want you to reach out to them.
They really do.
Follow along with their demos. I'm going to try the IoT demo again and try not to electrocute myself this time.
I'm going to see if I can find that Raspberry Pi somewhere. It's in a closet.
All right. Thank you so much for being here with us. Till next time.